Good evening.
I know.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Pete Berube. I'm the chairperson of the Millis Finance Committee. Tonight is 15 March. I'm going to ask all of the board members, or excuse me, committee members to introduce themselves, starting at my left.
This is just information that was provided.
Peter
to me,
Underhill.
So we know.
Sean Moore.
Jody Garson.
Kathy McInnes.
Joyce Boyardi.
Sarah Reyes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. We've got several items obviously on the agenda, which is posted, and some meeting material. I've asked Mr. Catalano to come before us. We're going to have a discussion about some of the budget challenges that the school and the town are facing. Several of us, 4 of us, attended the school committee meeting last night and heard the budget hearing that was presented to the school committee. So we're a little bit aware, some of us are aware of that situation. In a nutshell, the town is faced with a fairly substantial budget shortfall. Mr. Catalano, I haven't asked him to come to us to go into nuts and bolts, because we'll have our presentation from the school committee is, I believe, scheduled for the 2 weeks from tonight on the 29th. But really, I wanted to discuss kind of some of the higher level issues that, in terms of process and how we go about working with the select board and the school committee to bridge the gap. And so, can we quiet down a little bit? Thank you. Mr. Catalano.
Mr. Berube, thank you for having me here. I don't know if you have specific questions or if you want me to just kind of recap where we were from last night and maybe delve into some more of the next steps, logistics of what happens if.
Would you, how about this? How about you summarize the situation, and then I do have some questions that, that I'd like to ask. Again, I don't want to go into nuts and bolts and every element of the
Sure.
budget, and, you answer as you deem appropriate if we get to, down in the weeds.
Sure.
I'm really just trying to give us an understanding of what the process could be in the event that, and it's looking like, there's no real way to couch this, and there's no sense in couching this. It looks like there are cuts that are going to come before the town in school staff. I don't think there's any way around that, my personal opinion. Now, perhaps in the next 2 months or month and a half, we will find a way. Maybe the state comes through with some funding. I am not hopeful, and I don't think you're hopeful
I
that
am
that's
not
going to
hopeful
happen.
at all.
So based on the numbers that were presented at the budget hearing last night, I fully anticipate that there will be cuts that the town will be forced to vote on at the Springtown meeting on May 3rd. I think all of us, it's in all of our interests, no matter where you sit on, issues of budget, that we preserve the quality of education that Millis is known for and that has worked hard to achieve. And also to not be as, these are difficult decisions, and not to disrupt people's livelihoods without putting in the most earnest effort at not doing that. So I take it very seriously, and I think all of us do. And so that's why I think we'll be spending likely many meetings, both during our public meetings and some workshops.
Sure.
Trying to help work this issue out, so.
And I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I think we've laid the groundwork in the last couple tri-board meetings, in the time before the first tri-board meet, or the time between the first tri-board meeting, the second one, and where we had the budget presentation last night. We were able to clarify the numbers, and the numbers did not improve by any means. When we came to the first tri-board, we were using a deficit of about $1.4 million. That number has not changed. In fact, it's gone up. And one of the reasons that we explained this last night, and I'll take the blame for this one, is that we hired, and we said mid-year FY23. So after the budget was approved in FY23 last May, and we started the fiscal year, there were several move-ins and changes in IEPs around students in SPED that mandated and required us to hire additional teachers and aides. So all of the mid-year staff increases, which is roughly, I have my notes, I'm gonna just use rough numbers, is about $361,000 or $370,000 were directly related to SPED. So that money on top of the money that we identified with the increase in tuitions, which was 14.1%, but there were also not just out of districts, there were teachers to keep kids in district, to support kids in district, van drivers, bus aides, all of that in total was an additional 1.4 million. So you put that on top of the mid-year FY '23 money, and we're looking at a $2 million budget reduction, but as we talked about last night, that doesn't account for marijuana impact funds. So that marijuana impact funds gets us to about, actually, I'll give it the exact number, $1,872,503. So when you back out the marijuana impact money, we're at a $1.8 million deficit. And just to clarify, if we have to meet that deficit, as of last night, we identified $99,000 in expenses, and the only other way to make that is losing approximately 27 3/4 personnel. So 27 people and part of a position, we would lose that from the district. And quoting the superintendent, that is a draconian cut that would significantly and severely impact the schools, and that is more than 10% of our staff, overall staff. That is something that we're shuddering to think of having to meet that, plain and simple. This is all of the deficit. All of the deficit is directly related to increase in SPED costs and increase in kids in the SPED program and changing IEPs. This is not out-of-control contracts. This is not out-of-control spending on expenses. We reviewed all of our contracts. When you back out the increase in SPED funding and tuitions out of district, we're hovering right out just over 4%. So our 4% increase from year to year, which we agreed to, we would be in a very comfortable place. We're not in a comfortable place. Our increase is 9%, and almost all of that is directly related to these increase in SPED costs. Is that a good enough summary? It's not a good
I think
summary,
so.
but I'm saying,
I have the advantage of having attended last night and we didn't have quorum last night, so not everybody did.
okay,
And I'm not asking you to go into much more detail. It does reiterate much of what I heard last night, and that's fine. I do have some questions, and we'll go into it, and I'm sure there will others that will have questions as well. I guess I want to start by saying that I'm not looking to help in the sense that I'm looking to get into the school committee's business on how you manage the school.
Sure.
The schools, those public schools. That's not our job. You have the authority and responsibility to do that. You know, the 3-mile-long screwdriver, we're not trying to help from afar. What I really want to do is make sure that we all understand the things that we will be voting on, so we have the best information. And sometimes that means we're going to ask questions where, you know, we'll ask, how did you get to this, and did you think of this type questions. But I in no means I'm not second-guessing anybody. I believe most every number and fact and figure that was presented very well by Superintendent Mullaney last night. So, again, we're going to go over the budget in great detail, and what I've already conveyed to Mr. Catalano for our budget hearing on the 29th. I hope that Mr. Mullaney doesn't give us the same budget presentation that he gave last night, because I hope between now and the next 2 weeks we make some progress on knowing where this $1.872 million, how that gap gets bridged. And I would like to be able to come up with in the next 2 weeks, a process, make sure we understand the process and we're able to collaborate and help with that. Because there's only so many ways that you can get there. We suspect that there won't be time for an override. I've talked to a select board, to at least 2 different select board members on that, and I think they agree. Nobody expects there to be an infusion of state aid between now and town meeting when the budget must be voted. So that leaves us with very few avenues. One of those is essentially taking, or allocating free cash that may be right now desired to be used on capital expenditures, use those as a one-time, and I shouldn't say one-time because we've already did it once, we did it last year, but do it as a incremental funding of that gap, that $1.872 million. Another one is to dip into stabilization funds. Another way is a combination of those. Another way is for the school to make cuts. I think if you were to talk to one of the most knowledgeable people I know on the town's finances, that's Select Member Schultz, he will tell you that you can do those things, but you're never going to get to $1.872 million. There will be cuts, and I don't agree with everything that Craig Schultz says, but I believe him on this. I think he's right. I don't think we'll get there to come up with nearly $2 million. So I sound like a broken record, but I want to just make sure that we're clear to residents that this is what is before us and that we take it very seriously. And so that's kind of where I'm starting before I ask you some questions. Can you go through the process and timeline for the school, if the school, when the school is asked to make cuts, or if that were to be voted? Does that happen before town meeting? Does it happen after town meeting, before July 1st?
It would absolutely be before July 1st. And in fact, most of the personnel that would be let go are under CBAs. They're union employees. Not all of the unions dictate exactly when they should be given notice, right? We're not going to give someone notice on 6/29 for a 6/30 layoff date. That's unfair. We would never do that. The reality is we'd have to start notifying people. What we could do is give everyone in the district a layoff notice. I think that's ridiculous. That's not the way to approach. What we would have to do is give a certain amount of people that we've identified, that the administrators have identified, notice sometime in April. I think that's the only fair way to do that you'd want to give people the opportunity to go seek employment elsewhere. We don't want to lose our staff. They fit our culture, they fit the district, they're buy into the philosophy, but these are humans that have jobs and they have families, and they have to go look for somewhere else. So what we would hope is if we give someone a notice that they don't go off and find another job and we then recoup the money, but to be realistic, it'd have to be sometime in mid-April, right? There's no definitive, there's nothing in the contract that says we have to do it by April 15th, but that's, as you heard last night, and for others that weren't there, the superintendent, we've talked about this at several school committee meetings. This is not completely surprising. The number that was talked about last night was fairly new, but they went and spoke, the superintendent went and spoke to all of the faculty and staff in all of the buildings over the last couple weeks. And so it's out there, right? It's out there. I'm not going to name positions. They're not going to name positions. But as we get closer to April, if we have not fixed it or identified, or if we don't know what gap we can close, then we're going to be giving notice to more than 10% of the district to saying your job is in jeopardy, and there's a chance that on July 1st you will not be working for the Millis Public Schools. We don't want to do it, but we're being realistic about it, and so it's the question of how many notices go out, but that's the time frame.
And you kind of hit on a reason that I think that the process and timeline is so important. It's because if the town is going to bridge some of that gap through available resources, it needs to be done now. It needs to be done very quickly so that the target for potential layoffs isn't 27 when it doesn't need to be, if it doesn't need to
Right.
be. If the target is 15, because that's what we're able to bridge, and that's what, we won't know until town meeting. So May 3rd, we won't know for certain until it's voted.
Right, so
But
we would
that's not to
still be
say-
limited, we'd still be saying, look we don't think it's gonna be necessary, but until town meeting votes, it is up in the air.
Correct, and likely, I'm surmising that likely you'll have to have a plan for both. You'll have to have a plan that says, the town, and when I say the town, I mean us, the school, the town budget.
Yep.
We come up with resources to bridge the gap, some portion of $1.872 million. Whatever's left over is kind of Plan A for the lesser of evils. And I'm trying to select my words very carefully here, because I've gone through this in other places in my life where we've done layoffs and we've done reduction force and buyouts and those types of things. And it is very traumatic for everybody involved, most of all, obviously, the people that are directly affected. So I apologize up front if I don't mean to be, flip with any of my words. I'm trying to use choose my words properly and with some sensitivity. But so Plan A would be to lay off as few persons as possible.
Correct.
If that were to fail at town meeting, there has to be a Plan B likely in place, potentially, so that notices could go out after that. If the budget, if the town were to reject the budget, and then the next budget says, no, that more cuts would be needed, you'd have to have something in reserve.
I think the initial plan prior to town meeting, even if something came up and said we can recoup $1.4 million, $1.5 million, and we're still looking at 300,000, it's not definitive, correct, right? Until we vote on it. I don't know if notices would go out to 28 people. We'd have to have a conversation with the administrators on the best way to approach it. I think there'd be there have been conversations with all staff, there have been conversations with union presidents. So I think there would be a collaborative conversation across the table saying, look, this is what the potential is. Plan for the worst, hope for the best, right? But the meetings with the staff, the last couple Mondays, the meeting last night, the union president was there. She represents 3 units, the majority of the teaching staff and the educational staff. There's a lot of apprehension and a lot of anxiety in the building, as to be expected. We're trying to be realistic and not oversell, not undersell, but try to be realistic about it. But there's no assurity, right, until town meeting, plain and simple.
I'm just going to go through some questions because I had some prepared, and then absolutely I will open it up. And if somebody wants to jump on or pile on to a particular question or answer, please just get my attention. So last night you'd mentioned that I think you mentioned that there were, or Mr. Mulaney mentioned that there were 2 staff or faculty members that potentially could be retiring, and I think, I'm guessing that's just kind of an in-cycle thing or a coincident occurrence. My question is whether the district has the ability to incentivize early retirements or retirements somehow in order to avoid or reduce the potential for layoffs.
We can't buy years. Years is the key for teacher retirements. And we do have a transition plan in the existing contract, but it takes 3 years. So they put their notice in for 3 years, and they get a 5% salary bonus each year for those 3 years. If they pull their papers and don't retire, they have to pay it back. So there's no one else in the process. So even if someone came forward, there's no benefit to them at this point, because almost all of the teachers, it's in their contract, they take that as a process, which helps us with planning, right? Someone is giving us notice that very rarely does someone pull back out. So we can start to plan. We can't go and tell someone to retire. The union president kind of puts the feelers out, and we only have one right now, I don't want to say definitive, very, very close, and I think there's a second one that was a new, even prior to the last meeting in last night. So there's really no other way to incentivize, because it's the years that they need to max out in the mass teacher retirement system. And the paras, I believe, are part of that as well, so they're all fall under the umbrella, they're MTA.
Okay. As I understand it, much of the deficit is coming from out-of-district costs, whether that be tuition, whether that be driving. It's out-of-district costs associated with fulfilling the responsibilities that the district has to provide services for those students that need them outside of district, that currently can't be provided here. And so my question is whether or not the district has, or would look at adding special education staff in order to maximize or minimize the students that go elsewhere. Is there the potential that you could add, and I'm just throwing a number out there, five special educators that are properly credentialed that could be hired to provide the most bang for the buck? If there are 37 students currently and the number's going to be 40 or it's going to be 30, that perhaps it's not one for one, but perhaps you hire 5 so that you can keep 10 in district, and perhaps not have to cut as many, or you just reduce the number and maybe that helps. Is that something that's even in the realm of possibility?
Well, it's a great question, and this is something that we've pushed back on the district, not just this year, but last several years. And I think what you're seeing is those FY23 mid-year hirings was exactly part of that, to try to get ahead of kids that were on the path to go out of district, to try to keep them in district. So we're doing that whenever we can. There are some of the kids that are going to go out of district, we don't have the resources available, even if we hired. There's specialized service, social and emotional learning that is done at, some of these are extreme cases that we can't handle within the district. The TIES program, which was mentioned for our 18 to 22-year-old students, is a perfect example. We were sending those kids out of district. Some were going to Medfield, some were going out of programs, and we had a cohort, and we had an opportunity with some hiring to start this program and create this program. And those are kids that are preparing for 22 and beyond that we're keeping in district. There's a cost to it, but it's much cheaper than going out of district. So over the years, we've done that when we can. When there's a group of closely situated kids, we can do that, students. We can't always do it, and sometimes, regardless of how good our teachers are, we can't keep some kids in district. They have to go out of district because that's where they're best served. And sometimes it's their IEP dictates that they go out. We have a certain amount of control, but the IEPs and educational planning is not a district-only process. There's a state overview and a state review. So it's a great question where we have spent money in the past in an effort, even sometimes with the youngest kids, because we can start to see them going down a path, and if we can try to intervene early on, they're gonna have a better career, and hopefully we'll be able to keep them in district. We've adopted the philosophy that we're the best position to teach our kids and try to keep them at district at all cost, and sometimes we just can't do that.
Okay, all right. And just keep in mind, for everybody to keep in mind, that it's not just one-for-one educators, it's the transportation, it's the buses, it adds up. There's overhead
The
or
aides on the
indirect
buses,
costs
right, exactly.
associated with that. Has the town, are you aware whether or not the school board or the select board, or has the town written in the requested letters that our representatives have recommended we
Not yet.
send to the governor? Okay.
Not yet, and this is recorded and I'm under oath, I guess. I'm a little disheartened that the best that we could get was write a letter, which we will write a letter, but also what we wanted to do was get to the budget last night and get a final number. I think we had a good idea, but now we're in a better position to say, this is the deficit, here's the impact, this is what we're facing. So the short answer is no, they haven't been written. They will be written, and we will send them. We're just,
Would you recommend the Finance Committee write a letter? Would it hurt?
I don't think it, well, I guess if I'm going to be a cynic, not that I'm a cynic, would it help?
I don't think it's going to help.
I don't think it's going to help. Here's what
But it wouldn't
personally,
hurt.
I'll speak for myself and the committee. We have to do our due diligence, and doing our due diligence is writing a letter. I don't think it's going to help us in the short period of time. Does it help lay the groundwork for next year? Because and I said this last night, what we heard from our elected officials, everyone in their districts are saying the same things. It's all relative, it depends on the size of the district, but all school districts are facing the same dilemma. It's just a matter of relativity, how big. So I think it could help if all of a sudden letters are coming in from everywhere. But to Mr. Conroy's point, they increased our Chapter 70 aid, but it went across the state, and we saw, I forget what the percent.
$60,000.
Which, I'll take 60 grand, but 60 grand is nothing to what we need. So it's a bigger conversation about circuit breaker funding. It's a bigger conversation about school funding. And as much as I care for the big cities and the gateway cities, I care about Millis. My job is to advocate for Millis, as your job is to advocate for Millis. And
Right.
I think there's letters to be written and more meetings to have. I just don't think it helps us in this period of time.
Real quick, and then I'll go to other members. I just think that, given that our elected representatives have advised us to do that, and given that people's livelihoods are on the line, I think we should do it.
100%, we're gonna do it. And we really did want to get to the point of having the final numbers.
Right. Okay, Mr. Lohr.
No, go right ahead.
Thank you. The presentation last night was fantastic, so I appreciate the school committee as well as the superintendent. Along the same vein of writing letters, is the school committee talking with other districts, since we're all in the same situation of trying to fund deficits right now, in terms of sharing ideas or looking at what other towns are doing relative to what we're doing, understanding that there's differences between districts and what they're facing, but during these times, it seems like it'd be better to pool resources together and understand what other people are doing, where we might be able to take some ideas or strategies.
So we're doing it informally and formally. We're doing it, the Mass Association of School Committees has a listserv. There's meetings, there's newsletters that go out.
Okay.
So we're seeing what others are doing, and a lot of it is, how are we gonna get through this? There's not a lot of definitive, this is A, B, and C. We're also doing it at the administrative level, and over the course of several years, I've been on the committee for 12 years, actually, 13, kindergarten to 12, 13 years. A long time.
Kindergarten.
I got
Is
on
that
when
when
my
you
son
started?
was in
Oh,
kindergarten.
I thought you.
Not me. And we have worked with other districts. We've provided transportation for other districts. So there have been times over the years, we've shared staff, kitchen staff, or the kitchen managers between Medway. So we've, not just in this issue and this year, whenever we can save efficiency and money and do more for less, we have done that. So I'm not seeing, the only solace I get is that everyone's in the same boat. That doesn't give me really any solace, but I don't think there's a magic, it's really about cash.
Yeah.
Ms. Boyardi?
Okay. I have a few questions, and I'll be as quick as I can. First off, you just mentioned sharing with Medway, and I know years ago we talked about regionalizing with them. And originally they had wanted to, and then they said not. Well, now that we're faced with the same dilemma they're faced with, I'm sure, but they've got
Yeah, I don't know their exact numbers.
But no, I don't know their exact numbers either, but I know they're significant. Would there be a possibility of discussing, I know it's not for next year, but to now, because of all the problems our towns are facing, and it's not gonna go away, could we then have another visitation for regionalization with Medway?
Of what?
With our school, our high school, so that we're not taxed as much down the road. I'm not maybe even middle school, high school, and keep our elementary. Other option would be high school students. We've got, I thought I had a copy for you. I'm sorry. It's colleges that kids from Tri-County have gone to, and they're exceptional, and they've got AP courses. Could we possibly, down the road, have our high school students all go to Tri-County somehow? Figure it out, because they need a new school, we need a new school. Maybe our funds could then go to them to help with the building. Maybe our funds could then not have to have such a large middle school built. These are just some ideas that have been broached to me, and I said I will bring them along. Let's see. Could cuts be made? I know that there's talk about all these teachers and paras that are going to be cut, but what about assistant principals? What about secretaries? What about support staff rather than the teachers? Do we have qualified volunteers that can step into a classroom next year and help out? When my kids were young, we volunteered an awful lot in the classroom. Perhaps that's an idea to get us just through this next year until we can figure out what we can do. And last but not least, a GoFundMe page. Somebody asked me if we could do a GoFundMe page for the school. It's not something that we can't do. It was just finding the right person to run it. And it might be a bank. Maybe we approach Middlesex Savings Bank or Needham Bank and see if they could manage a GoFundMe page. Even if we raised $400,000, that could be 4 salaries. So I'm trying to think outside the box, because we don't have the money. I mean, this is a lot of money, and all towns are facing it. But we're a small town, so we're being hit, I think, even harder than some of the larger towns. So those are all my questions.
Okay.
Yes, yes, no, no, maybe, maybe.
Okay, you want me to address all of them?
If you could.
Okay, I'm not sure it's reasonable to close the Millis High School, middle school, and send everyone to Medway. I don't know what their capacity is, I'm not sure.
Right, I'm not saying send them all to Medway.
I don't know where the cost savings would be, because we'd have to have transport. I hear what you're saying. I also don't think sending every kid to Tri-County is a,
Well, 38 of our students go now, we've got 63 left. So, I look at our small size classes and I'm thinking, well, maybe we could.
there's 400 kids in the high school.
Yes, but I'm saying 400 students, but, well, okay, go on.
Okay. So
I'll just listen.
Medway, what was the next one?
Qualified volunteers.
Teaching has to be done by licensed professionals. They have to have licensure from the state. So we could not replace teachers.
But what about
With volunteers.
volunteers? I'm not saying teachers, I'm saying people that can come into the classroom and help the teacher.
We still need the teachers, and the problem is the teachers are in the classroom. So there have been some volunteers. I used to volunteer at the Clyde Brown. There's not a lot of volunteers once you get beyond the elementary school level. What we need is not as much as there are probably good-natured or people who want to do their part. We need teachers in the classroom who are licensed so we can meet our state mandate.
Could you address teachers versus staff cuts and layoffs?
I believe there are minimal staff in there. I'll give you, for example, there's no bus drivers or van drivers. We're razor thin. It's happened a couple of times this year. One bangs out sick, one calls in sick. We can't run a bus. So we're not in a position to lose bus drivers, because if we do, we can't get the kids to school. The administrative staff in the offices is at a razor thin margin. That they're doing a lot of additional work. They're helping out guidance, they're helping out other parts of the district. So I think there's a couple potential spots there, but that's also not going to it's not going to meet the deficit. We are not overstaffed or heavy staffed in any aspect of that district, from the custodians to the drivers, to the food services, to the teachers, to the paras. And when it comes to paras, we have, and I don't have an exact percentage, we asked this. A paraprofessional.
Paraprofessional.
Just to let people.
Almost, thank you. Almost all of the paras, not every single one, are tied to an IEP. So the IEP is written saying, this student must have, it's a mandate that they must have a para. I believe one or two of the positions that were going to be, or were slated for elimination were generalized paras. Other than that, so that's not a group that we can pull from because they're assigned to IEPs. I'm not fighting you. It
No, I
just-
know, no,
I
you're
just,
not.
I don't think the volunteers,
My idea of volunteer, though, could be a retired teacher.
yeah, but they have to have a license.
Don't they keep their they don't keep their
Can I
licenses?
just interject right here? That issue, that question could be very timely if cuts were made. They don't save us from being able to keep teachers on salary now. If we lose teachers, potentially that changes and the need for volunteers goes up. But in order to bridge $2 million, volunteers aren't going to do it.
No, I know, and have you ever considered, when you were doing your budget cuts, of doing it so that there was instead of cutting 22 to 27, cutting 10 to 14 to see what the.
It doesn't get us there.
It doesn't get us,
No.
but it gets us in a less deficit, I mean.
If we get to the point where we make we reduce the deficit, we'll reduce the amount of people out the door. 10 to 14 doesn't get us there. We've gone through these numbers. It's 27.75
That would
as
get
we
you to
stand
where
here
you
tonight.
need to be, but what I'm saying is if you did a 12, 14 person cut, that presentation, and then we saw the difference, maybe
Well,
there.
that's what I was speaking of before. If the town comes up with resources, whatever that number is, and the select board will have to go through that with their departments to figure out what the town is willing to propose and what the select board is willing to propose in their budget. That changes the number for the school potentially.
Right.
Mr. Crone?
A couple of questions, please. So of the 270 staff you indicate,
No, 27.75.
no, you said you had, how many staff members total?
It's about 220 something.
So of the 220, how many of those are teachers?
It's a great question. I should,
Well, you calculated a cost savings based on eliminating 27 staff members if you had to. How did you calculate that? What number of teachers, what number of administrators did you utilize? And what was the average salary?
I don't have that number. That was done by the administrator, that was done by Terry Wigan, who was our business manager and human resource manager, as well as the superintendent and the admin team. I don't have the list. I don't have,
We will
We're
have,
not gonna-
we will have something like that, closer to that, on the 29th, if it's disclosable.
we're not going,
Right.
we're not going to
But
disclose
you can do
positions.
you can do the math. He told us that there's 27 cuts, and that's 10% of staff. So it's 270.
I'll confirm, let me confirm the number, but we're not going to, here's what I will say, we're not going to produce a list of positions.
Understand.
I'm not going to do that.
Are the rules? can
I
you-
will give you, I can give you some breakdown on what buckets, I can do that, I'm not going to give you positions.
Can you affirm
can do
if
that.
the rules for a layoff, whatever the right term is it?
A reduction in
first?
force.
Is it first in, last in, first out?
No.
Yes, unless there's a special license or some sort of exemption, but as a rule, it would be.
General terms. So that
First,
kind of tells
last
you.
in, first out.
That
And
potentially
then-
tells you, unless you hired somebody that was in more senior.
But sometimes there's specific license that doesn't, that they're not being bumped. This becomes a very technical, and then if positions are eliminated and the person's not going out the door, they can then bump other people. It becomes a cascading, it is a in addition to the 27 people that would, going on, that's a horrible situation. And then the upheaval that it caused within the culture, it's a very, very difficult situation, which I know no one's, we all understand that, but there's cascading waves of issues associated with that.
Second question, so let's say it comes down to the wire and it looks as though you're gonna have to lay off 27 people.
Mr. Cron, can you speak to the microphone?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry. So it comes down to the wire, and it looks like the only solution is to lay off 27 staff members from whatever departments. Would it be something that the school committee would consider going to the unions and saying, rather than lay off 27 people, can we come up with a new structure of salaries to keep the 27? Some may lose some money, but is that something you guys would even consider doing?
If, once we have an idea exactly what we're at, I think we'll look at all possible legal options
No, I understand.
for us.
I mean, you'd have to negotiate with the union, obviously.
I think, as a general rule, we don't like to open up contracts mid-contract, but in a situation like this, I think we would look at all legal possibilities. I also think that we're having some preliminary conversations with our council on what, if anything, how we can approach just the overall process.
Oh, and that other
Thank you.
question was the GoFundMe.
I want to get through this year, and then I want to work on an operational override, because that's the GoFundMe that we have to work on. Because the town has needs, the school have needs, and I don't see this problem going away. I don't think
Oh, I don't
GoFundMe.
either. I'm just saying for short term.
Okay, Ms. Garzon?
So what happened in Newton yesterday doesn't bode well for an
No, I
override. I'm just putting that out there.
Do you want to brief everybody on what happened in Newton?
So there were 3 items up for vote in Newton yesterday. There were 2 that involved the funding of schools. Those passed, and the operational override of $9 million did not. And that was slated somewhat loosely for schools and other items.
I heard that this morning.
Yeah, I mean, the writing was on the wall that that third one probably wouldn't pass, but it didn't pass by a lot. And in this environment, overrides are tough. My question is about the longevity of the gap. You know, of what we anticipate. Like, we're looking at a deficit of, let's call it 1.9 million.
Sure.
For this coming year. Do we have a sense of how long that gap will persist? Is that 1.9, and then that 1.9 gets added on to the next year? Or is it a one-time issue because then state reimbursements will catch up to a certain point? Or do we not know?
We don't know. But let's digest that a little bit. We could go in opposite directions, right? So what we haven't seen is a lot of move-outs, okay? Where a family moves out, where the kid who's is out of district, which could be anywhere from 100 to 150,000, right? And they move out, and they move to the next town, and at a certain point, that's no longer on our doles. We have a good school system. We have an attractive town. People are moving to town. What we're seeing is move-ins. And in fact, I was just going through my notes. That 360,000, the mid-year FY '23 was related to changes in IEPs, and I think, don't quote me, I think 2 move-ins. So what happens is we don't know. There's no assurity. We can, if we look at our head count right now out of district, we could operate on the worst-case scenarios, that all of them stay out of district until '22, and then they come off of our rolls. What I think has to happen, to Mr. Berubie's point, to Chair Berubie's point, is the state they have to do something else with their circuit breaker funding, and the formula is complicated. We never get nearly enough money, and, you know, we see incremental changes. We'll see in FY '25, we'll see an increase in our circuit breaker, but that's directly related to the dramatic increase in sped cost in FY '24. So you'll see in further years a little bit of an increase. What we need to do is change the formula. One of the bills, there's a bill that's being bandied around. We get 75% above a certain number. They're trying to say it should be 90% of the cost. Increments like that could start to change it. I don't think it's a short-term solution. It really is dictated by headcount and IEPs, and they can change. They generally don't change the opposite, where they're no longer on IEP. What I think our best, to Mr. Berube point, our best bet is if we fund as much as we can within the district to keep kids in district. So identify the kids, in a couple of these positions mid-year were preschool, kids coming into preschool. We had to start, and they talked about this last night, we had to start a whole nother classroom to accommodate this student and others, is to keep kids in district, but that has to start pre-K, K, and 1. I'm not trying to avoid the answer to your question. I wish I could tell you in 2 years we're gonna be fine. I don't see it, and I'm hoping that the state passes a ridiculous and authorizes a ridiculous 14% increase. I would have been okay with the 14% increase if they increased our Chapter 70 funding by 14%. That's ridiculous. I have no problem saying that on camera to the thousands of people watching.
And
or
we're
the
sitting on
5.
trillions of dollars in a surplus.
Could you let the people on TV land know what circuit breaker money is?
Circuit breaker money-
And what Chapter 70 is?
Chapter 70 is local aid, and that's associated with school funding. I think all school funding, Chapter 70? Or do some of it break off? It's all school funding. And then circuit breaker is associated with sped cost. So and I'm going to tell you right now, I am not a circuit breaker. It's like the cap and then the NFL. I don't know either one. I know that there's a certain amount, and I have a full.
I have it, and I remember,
50
no, it is 70 cents for every dollar over $45,000 in tuition.
That seems right. Thank you.
Telling you, I just verified it. Mr. Mulaney described it very well last night. And I would recommend everybody start.
Repeat that again, Mr. Chair, please.
So for out-of-district tuition costs, for every dollar spent by the district over $45,000, the town gets 70 cents on the dollar over $45,000. So if tuition costs $45,001, we're getting 70 cents.
That's right. And so one of the moves on the state level is to go from 70% to 90%.
And maybe something that hasn't been explained fully is this 14% raise. The state, for these out-of-district private institutions essentially that provide special education services, the state sets the rates. That's the issue. The state sets the rates. The state set a rate of 14, it was increased by 14% this year.
Well, that was
with-
Governor Baker.
Without, funding commensurate with that increase. So that is a huge portion of this deficit that we're talking about. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap it up unless somebody has something.
I do, Mr. Chair, please, may I?
Yes.
Thank you. I wasn't there last night, but I kind of watched it. You talked about, first off, I don't understand how come, just generally, we're done with students when they turn 18, but yet with SPED, we own them until they're 21 or 22?
22. By law. It's not an option.
I wonder if anyone would ever think about that. Anyway, I also heard that administrators are foregoing their pay raises, but I did not hear anybody say that administrators would be laid off, a percentage of them, to coincide with the percentage of the teachers and paraprofessionals.
No, the only reduction in administrative salaries are for all raises.
Okay.
We can't lay off a principal, plain and simple.
And then also, it kind of broke up a little bit. COVID money was received to the school for staffing?
There were some, There were some positions funded, and that funding is no longer available.
Are you absorbing those teachers or those positions in your current budget?
Yes.
Did you feel a need for those teachers before COVID became available? Yeah, I equate it to almost like the firemen that were given 4 firemen over the course of 4 years. You're thrown this gift of staff, and then they shorten the amount of time that they're going to provide funding for the staff. Does there come a point where the funding's over and you didn't have them before, and do you need them now?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Mr. Lohr, he's been waiting patiently. No problem.
In yesterday's presentation, there was reference, I believe, to a circuit breaker with extraordinary relief. Do you know anything about?
There's a potential if the state puts money into extraordinary relief, we could see more money, but it's not going to meet the whole gap. I think the amount, I'm going to derail the meeting by saying the extraordinary relief,
I guess the question is, what would be the amount, and then what would trigger it to kick in?
125.
current estimates of private school and collaborative school placements place this number at 26. Under the current rules, if circuit breaker claims in any year do not exceed 25% more than the prior year, the district would not be eligible for extraordinary relief. Current estimates of private school and collaborative placements place this number at 26.25. If that number were to hold, relief would be negligible, sorry. If it was to be reduced, it would not occur. So it would be, we'd have to go above 25%.
Yep.
Mr. Cron, thanks.
Yes, I actually watched the presentation last night. I had the opportunity to watch it again. For those who didn't make it to the meeting last night, it is taped, and all of the slides are online. You can get the slides that were there last night, so for people who are listening to this, there's plenty of opportunity to listen to the presentation again and to get the materials, and thank you for doing that. It was a good presentation.
Mr. Chair,
Scott?
thank you. Jeff Fusey, 411 Union Street. Have you guys, has the state reps been to your meetings, the ROSA? Have you reached out to the state reps
Yeah,
to see
we met
what they
with
can
them.
do? Because this is, from what I'm hearing, this is going to be devastating, and we have great schools.
They were very, they
And-
met
and
with
you
us.
guys have done a great job up the school board, but it's, you know, they're important too, and it's, hopefully they can go in the state house and make some noise and say, hey, don't forget a town like Millis. This is a big hit to this community, so, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm still saddened, Mr. Chair, that we were advised not to send letters individually yet until letters were sent by you, so.
I mean, I've already talked to the state legislature myself, and everybody says talk to the governor.
Well,
So,
they're just
All right,
pawning it off.
I'm gonna move on just because we have an agenda. We can certainly talk about this some more.
Mr. Baruti, can you and I follow up tomorrow on anything that you think is a takeaway that you
Certainly.
need?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate everybody's comments, questions. Keep them coming because we'll be talking about this likely weekly. Or more. Mr. McKay? So Mr. McKay is going to provide the DPW FY '24 budget presentation.
All 2 books full.
No.
Well, I hope that we get to have all questions answered, and we have a lively discussion, because it is a rather large budget in the town. So the Department of Public Works is made up of 7 departments: highway, snow,
Can we ask them to?
snow and ice, street lighting,
Oh,
transfer station, with the budget
Mr. McKay,
of-
1 minute.
yeah.
I'm just going to say this for everybody in the room. For the sake of our listening audience, for the sake of me, because I can't multitask, I need to listen to one person at a time. But for everybody, please give your attention to the speaker who has the floor, Mr. McKay.
Thank you. So where I left off, the budget for the highway, what we call highway department, is $1,227,625. The water department is made up of a budget of $2,000,000 $9,736. Sewer Department has a budget of $1,644,806. Stormwater Department has a budget of $726,733, for a total budget under the DPW auspice of $5,608,900. Oops, that's right. With that, we have 16 staff members. We have a director, 1 1/4 administrators, 13 full-time DPW staff, and when we can get them, we have 3 summer help staff. With overtime baked into the budgets for all the different departments, the salary line item is $1,435,320. In FY '23, that was $1,307,177. There is an increase of $142, which is about 9.73%. And this is probably the first budget you've seen with everybody's salary increases. There's a 2% increase for the DPW director. There's all members of SEIU, there is 2% for them, and 2% for all DPW staff. The DPW staff, their contract goes for 3 years, same with SEIU, and the director is under the personnel plan, and that is reviewed once a year. So instead of going through all the pages, hopefully I can break it down a little better, because the original one that you received back, I think a month or 2 ago, it's all junk, throw it away, because this budget, even this budget here, is still not finalized, and I'll get into explanation of that as we go further. The general fund, the salary increase was $69,297, expenses of $11,480, for a total increase of $80,777.
Mr. McKay, why?
Pardon me?
Those increases, are
When I
those-
get to the end of it, most
Okay.
of it can be explained by two answers for each, or both of them.
Thank you.
The water department, we have a decrease of $28,298, and expenses, we have a great decrease of $317,194. I'll answer that one because that's $317,000. Everybody says, why? That is short-term, long-term borrowing on different projects that were bonded, and that's why there's such a reduction in that. For a total decrease of $345,492. The DPW sewer department, we have an increase of $12,608. Expenses, we have an increase of $15,343, for a total increase of $27,951. Stormwater had the largest increase of salaries of $58,676 and expenses of $37,794. And that's an increase of $96,460. And all the increases in the salaries, it's because of the increases of contractual amounts for the large point. The decrease, we did a large shift in the percentages in the departments, which hopefully, I gave you the copy of that. We can get into that discussion of percentages and all that later at the end of the meeting.
When you say percentage, you mean allocation
Yeah,
of costs
allocations of
between the
costs.
enterprises and the general fund?
Correct. We moved the percentages around for salaries of staff members, of the 16 members, all the 16 members. And I have a printout of that later. So now we can get into the accomplishments of FY '23. We paid Pleasant Street, Main Street, Village Street, and Exchange Street, and we spent, with Chapter 90 funding and some town funding, approximately $525,249. That's not approximate, that's exactly what we spent. The DPW completed supervision of the construction of the staff building, vehicle mechanic, and truck wash bay located at 7 Water Street. I have to say that, other than any project that's been built in this town, the DPW with the director and the DPW superintendent, we were the OPM managers, and we saved hundreds of thousands of dollars on this project, and we are doing the same with the PFAS plant building. I'm handling the costs and the billing aspects of it, and the DPW director, he is a licensed contractor, so he has the ability to oversee the projects and and work the construction. The PFAS treatment plant, the construction of the new PFAS treatment plant, and DPW staff will manage, we will manage that budget and supervise all construction as well. And as of date, the project is 75% complete and within budget. And when I talk about the DPW, that's the new PFAS plant that's being built for wells 1 and 2. We've accepted, DPW took responsibility of all roadways and infrastructure of the Hickory Hill subdivision, making it a public way. Culverts, we replaced major culverts on Ridge Street and Larch Road, reducing flooding in those areas. City Works, DPW crews and office staff have started tracking all work on the department's software system. What that does is when we get a work order or a phone call, we finally have the software that's going to track and keep a permanent record for forever. And we're trying to use that with a cost analysis for each job and hours spent for every DPW worker. The Millis Department of Public Works completed, I can't read with, I brought my wrong glasses. The Millis Department of Public Works complied with all state regulations. All permits for the water, sewer, and stormwater were submitted in a timely manner. The DPW applied in FY '23 and received the following grants in FY '23. A Mass DOT Shared Streets and Space Grant, and we purchased the Bobcat excavator for $49,000. A Mass DEP RDP grant for the self-contained compactor for $30,000. I think if anybody goes to the transfer station, they can see it's there. We're just waiting for Eversource to come in and finally hook up the power source for it. That could be another year. We received a Mass Clean Water Trust for the lead service inventory and replacement plan for $150,000. We received a grant from the Mass Clean Water Trust for an asset management planning grant. What we're doing with that is we're trying to combine the infrastructure for water and sewer, what's underground, and that grant was for $150,000. An MIA risk management grant application for a sewer camera that we put into the sewer system for $7,000. And most importantly, and it's not most importantly, but it's just, we file for grants, and the Mass 04 Community Project Funding, Millis Water Supply PFAS Treatment Design and Construction for $3,452,972. And I disagree. I think that for all the people that wrote letters to Congressman Auchincloss from this area, I thank them for that. And there was members sitting at this table that wrote past select board members and everybody else. And writing letters sometimes do work. And to get Little Millis up to get that grant, it came from letters to the congressman, because he was very impressed with this packet that we submitted. The Millis Department of Works grant funding for FY '23 was $386,000. The PFAS grant was $3,452,972 for a total of $3,838,972. And I think what I gave you pictures of, you're looking at our new staff building. You're looking at the second picture is the truck wash in the mechanics bay. The next is the skid steer, which was a lot of conversation last year. That was all paid for. The next is the compactor. And the next is a picture of the camera system that we use to get into the sewer system. And lastly, this is the picture of the PFAS plant building. It's come a long way since I took that picture. They're actually starting to put the walls up. I mean, you can see that the tanks inside, those are the charcoal filtering systems that the water will, go through. Maybe we'll talk about this now. I think that if everybody's been watching the news the last couple of days, they've finally seen that the EPA has come out with new regulations on PFAS. We've been talking about this for a long time, and we've been warning the town that it's coming. And luckily, the residents of Millis paid attention a long time ago. we're so far ahead of other cities and towns, and I'm talking big cities and big towns, even in this general area. You know, we did a show, Mrs. McGinnis did a show with Kathy Lannon about 4 years ago when we first started this process on what is PFAS. It's got one of the most hits that the cable has, that they've ever had. So I'd watch it. I would also, you know, we just did another one for an update on the PFAS plant. Later, we'll be talking about the design of well number 3. I think if you read the regulations, and we'll post it when Deirdre gets back on Monday, we'll post the link of the new EPA regulations. I encourage everybody, read it. It's a scary proposition. You know, he said that 5 years ago. It's a scary proposition. It's here. The EPA regulations on the 6 contaminants, they're lower than what the Mass DEP. And when you look at that, and again, you can go to the Millis website, DPW website. Every month we test for PFAS in almost every one of our wells. And we put the readings, whatever we get, it's put on there every single month. And you'll notice that I believe it's PFOA and PFOS. Those are the 2 that they're zeroing out with no contaminants. And we have that in every one of our wells, all 6 of them. By June or July of this year, wells 1 and 2 will be PFAS-free. And we do a pilot study. We just finished a pilot study at well 3. They test for all 29 of these contaminants. And that's what the regulation states. And with wells 1 and 2, it is going to eliminate the 29 contaminants. So the water that will come out of wells 1 and 2 will be PFAS-free. And hopefully, with the vote at town meeting, the design will be, you know, done for well 3, but we can talk about that in a little while. But again, I encourage everybody, keep up on this PFAS and lead and copper. Our water and sewer bills are approaching more than what our taxes are. And people need to pay attention and keep on the water and sewer aspects. And, well, we talk about that when we get to the 2 things that I have coming up. Our FY 24 goals. To complete and submit Millis lead and service inventory and replacement plan to the Mass DEP for approval. What that is everybody has, not everybody, a lot of older homes have lead in their services. The town's responsibility to replace lead services is from the water main to the house connection, the sidewalk control. The homeowner owns it from the sidewalk control into the house. But we have to have a plan of how, when we find out how many homes actually have it, we have to have the plan of how is that going to be done. The burden will be placed on the homeowner that has the lead service going from the sidewalk control into the house, but we have to bear the costs of replacing anything out in the street. And when we do a major water main project, most of that, you know, we do replace all up to the control service with lead-free copper and stuff like that. But there's still a lot out there that still is going to have to be taken care of. So that's why I say this could dwarf what a $6 million PFAS plant could cost in the very near future to Millis residents. That's just not Millis residents, that's everybody. Make final adjustments to the George DeAngelis water plant at a targeted date of, like I said, of June of 2023. We hopefully it'll be sooner than that, but if approved at spring town meeting, finalize all documents for the fall town meeting for the construction of a new PFAS-free treatment plant for well number 3. And that is located off of Village Street. It's in the woods. It's off of Birch Street. I don't know if any of you know where it is. You don't need to know where it is. It's because you're not supposed to know, with Homeland Security and stuff like that. It's in the woods. But it's, yep.
Where people used to make out in the 70s.
I think they still do.
Submit to the Select Board sometime March of this year, final paving plans. So work can be ready for the FY20 of $650,000 from the FY23 town meeting for, and use $274,000 of Chapter 90 funds. And we have our list. We also submitted, myself and the town administrator, we submitted another grant application of $750,000 to Congressman Auchincloss's office. We did it after I typed this up, for sidewalks from the Medway Town Line to, on Village Street, from the Medway Town Line to connect to Pleasant Street. Don't know if we're going to get it, but
Thank
Go,
you.
Peter.
it's a grant, it's a grant that, yeah.
Veterans Building.
Thank you.
Our plan still is, depending on the cost, we still have plans of resurfacing Plain Street this year, replacing the sidewalks on Plain Street. We did Pleasant Street last year, and we do, hopefully, depending on the cost, is finalizing, connecting Main Street to Village Street with the, replacing all the sidewalks from Primavera all the way down to Village Street. That's all depending on the costs. And what's left over after that, Walnut Street is a street that definitely has to be looked at. And that's about it with paving. I mean, we drive on Main Street and we talk about everything. The money just doesn't go that far. I mean, it just doesn't, to pave 109, we're doing a calculation, we're looking at almost between $500,000 to $1 million to finish paving Main Street, the sections that haven't been paved. So we're looking for the state. We met with them just the other day, Tuesday. And hopefully we're going to get some relief, and they may come in and help us pave 109, but we're working on it. And then, let's see, implement year 6 and 7 of the stormwater permit regulations. What that means is, when I showed you the cost of increase of the salaries in the stormwater, this is the year we actually have to go out and start doing construction work, implementation of the stormwater permitting. We have to go out and test within the next 5 years every outfall, every stream, every catch basin that the town owns. So that's why you see the shift. We shifted personnel from different departments to a bigger percentage in the stormwater account. And it was always planned that way. That's how we had it planned.
Mr. McKay,
Yes?
what are you testing for? Is it just inflow, or is it
No, it's
composition?
it's to anything that will lower the phosphorus load. So it's more, not bacteria would be one thing that we'd be looking for, but it's more of a, what a phosphorus load is it's emissions from cars, it's waste from animals that get into catch basins, into the stream. So when a car drives down the street, the emissions of the car that get stuck to the leaves on the trees, and when the leaves fall off, they fall on the ground, the water comes down, it washes the whatever off of the leaf, and it goes into the catch basin, and it eventually gets into the stream. So it's that type of high, whatever the readings, I don't know what the reading is off the top of my head, but there's specific things that we test for. And one of them is bacteria too, because a big thing is septic systems leaking that get into the streams and stuff like that. And make available grave lots finally, in our new Section G at the Prospect Hill Cemetery. I think if any of you know where the Prospect Hill Cemetery is, it's a beautiful site. Come some fall, and Steve will do a tour with you. He'll give you a nice tour of the cemetery. We're opening up a section that we believe with Section F, what we call Section F, and Section G will take people, mill us into the, next 10, 15, 20 years. And then we'll have to start looking at. We relaxed a lot of our regulations at the cemetery this year. Instead of, before you used to buy one lot, you'd have to buy one lot for each burial. We've separated it now that cremations, cremations are one of the biggest, upticking thing. You can bury 6 cremations in one lot. So, and that's been very successful.
Mr. McKay,
Yes.
I've got a question for you on
Yep.
cemetery. It came up, you had sent us the enterprise fund report a couple weeks ago, and I was reading that, and it pertains to the cemetery. Is the cemetery self-funding?
Yes, it's part of the enterprise, it's not an enterprise fund, it's part of the general fund. And I would say that we have one full-time staff that works there. And we do, I'd have to get you the numbers.
That's kind of my question is,
Yeah.
should it be an enterprise fund? If it's only the people that are using it and have paid for plots, bought in advance, and that cost includes the perpetual maintenance, why wouldn't it be an enterprise fund similar to the utilities?
So I think that the cemetery, the Prospect Hill Cemetery and the transfer station are the only two things that anybody in Millis can participate in. I mean, anybody,
Can, but don't necessarily.
but don't necessarily. And to go to do privatize, you wouldn't be able to have it as an enterprise fund. You'd probably have to privatize it to make it more, that successful. And we looked at that years ago, and it was just price prohibitive. It would not be, the cost of a grave, right now, our cost of our grave is $800, which is.
To
it-
purchase a plot.
To purchase a plot, and that's probably the cheapest, around.
I could make an argument, I don't know that I would, but I
Yep.
could make an argument that means that the town should not be doing it. No, in the fashion that it's doing it. It means it's coming out of the general fund, and it's using tax revenue for something that doesn't necessarily benefit all of the town, which is almost the premise of the enterprise funds. There have been arguments made that those that aren't on town sewer, those that have septic, should not be paying for overhead of the enterprise fund through their tax dollars, and
But they don't.
I
They
agree that.
They don't.
Or perhaps I said that wrong and backwards, but the point being that if I never intend to be buried in Millis, why should my tax dollars go for it?
Because, well, once, whatever check is written out, it's written to the town of Millis. It goes into the general fund, and we look, the town administrator, myself, we look at, and see how much, if it's in deficit, I can't say if it's in deficit this year. We know how many graves we sell each year. We know how many people get buried each year there. Maybe let me find out, and I can get back to you on what came in FY '23.
Another time.
Yeah, but I think that, all right, we don't have to debate it, because I
Thank you.
don't know if I totally agree with the, I agree that it should be looked at maybe someday of being privatized. I
Thank you.
think it's close. So I think,
I'd just like to say, I don't want people to think all of a sudden everything Millis does has to be for profit.
Yep.
There comes a point where you can be buried here. There's no perpetual care. The person
isn't.
that buys the lot does not, other private cemeteries, you're paying a couple $100, $300 a year to maintain your little 8x8 spot. So we don't have that. It's 800 and done. So,
and on that, I mean, it's not in the bylaws, but it's somewhere that it's written that, Millis will have a cemetery, and it will have it available to its Millis residents. And that's why we continually upgrade it, and we try to find space for upcoming people to be buried there. It's also available, it is written in the bylaws of the cemetery, that even if you move from Millis, if you lived here at one time, you can get buried there. But that's, so let's move on to, what do you want to talk about next? We pretty much did all the money aspects, so I'd like to get into, and then we go back and talk about the percentages later. So the capital items, do we have that?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the capital items, we're looking for replacement of replace it with a 2023 Chevy Silverado 350 dump truck. It's on the capital planning list to be replaced. It's actually 2 years overdue. And we're looking for, the price of it is $95,527, and that will be split 4 ways. That will be split through the general fund, water, sewer, and stormwater, because it's the main function of the DPW. The truck is used by all aspects of the of the town. And most importantly, it's used as a major plow route, because it's one of the, it's bigger than a pickup truck, but it's smaller than one of the large dump trucks. Next.
What's the impact to the department if this does not get funded this year?
It would be, it's costing us, it cost us through this winter, a lot of money for repairs. And if we don't get it, we'll have to continue to, you know, put it, because we have to have it out on the road. And if it's taken off the road, it's a contractor that we can't even get contractors, but it would be a contracted route. And it would just be a delay in, mainly is, you know, plowing.
Does that maintenance and repairs that you've done this year, do you think those will help get you through next year?
No. No, because you're talking about the frame is starting to rust out. I mean, you gotta remember, these trucks, it's got 100-something thousand miles on it, but they're 100-something plus thousand hard miles. It's not 100-something thousand miles that we have, that we put on our vehicles that are, you know, they're multiple different drivers. This truck has been moved down the line that, you know, some help kids when they come in, they use it.
Not your best drivers, is what you're saying?
Correct? And it's, you know, it's just a delay. If we don't do it now, you're gonna be replacing 2 next year. And if we don't do it next year, we'll be getting into the way we were when we had to replace 2 large dump trucks, 3 small dump trucks, and a pickup truck, because they're all taken off the road.
I don't mean to be argumentative,
Yep.
but I do want to say that I'm asking these questions because when we talk about what sacrifices and what choices are going to have to be made down the line between now and Springtown meeting, that's roughly equivalent to a salaried position at the school, a teacher's salary.
But no, I disagree. because
Perhaps with some funding, whether it's leased or bought.
No. You're talking about a 4-way split. It's what, split 4 ways. You're talking about
Okay, bad example.
23,000.
All right, you got me, bad
Yeah,
example.
yeah,
It's a quarter of a position.
I get that, but, you know, the town still has to operate.
I'm just trying to say,
Yep.
I'm not trying to be argumentative.
Yep.
I just want to make sure
Yep.
that we're keeping these
Yep.
discussions in context. And we should be looking through it at that lens, so that when it comes time to vote one way or another on whatever budget gets presented to us, that we have thought about it in advance. That's all.
And just remember that it is a 4-way split, and it's not the whole 95,000 for.
You're right.
for-
You're
for-
100%
for-
right.
yeah. And let me explain one thing. I think this came up during your conversation because I took out the street lighting box. When we come, well, I'll speak for myself. When the DPW comes to this committee or any committee with anything over $10,000, we go through the procurement process. There's a procurement process that is in place. The town administrator is the procurement officer, and Carol in her office, you don't get nothing by them unless it's done properly. And that's good. That's good. So anything that we come with, it's either has 3 bids, that we would have to prove before Lisa will sign off on it, or before Carol will sign off on the contract for it to be paid, or it has a contract. So like the street lighting box, I know there was a conversation about that. It was like $22,000. I think it's still in the packet, but it's not going to be here. That's our contractor. That's who we have, that's who went out to bid, and we're obligated to work with him because he has a signed contract with us. So that's how that was under a contract. And that's anything I have here. It's either has 3 bids, or you took out our free cash. So the next is and again, this will be split 4 ways too. It's a heavy-duty trailer. It's, right now, when we take an excavator out to work on a job, and the roller, we can take it with the trailer we have, we trailer it out, we drop it off, we have to go back and get the roller, bring that out, bring the skid steer out, because they don't fit on the truck together. This would be able to put all 3 pieces of equipment on it, it's that big, and we did work with, legally, we got 3 bids, and the local dealer that's been working with the town, he actually lives in Millis, he gave us a good deal. The price that he gave us, it's a much larger than anything you're looking at in here, for $22,000. And we bought most of our trailers from him, and it's because he lives in Millis, and he's a good friend to all of Millis.
Yes, he is.
He's worked for, sold trailers to, yes. So that's $22,000, and again, that would be split 4 ways. The rest coming up would be under the DPW Water Division. It's 4 chlorinators. It's just a must thing. The other ones are all old. We need 8 of them because they have to be replaced in each one of the wells. And that would be a total of $31,200, and that would be under the water fund. And I think I gave you all the stuff. You can look at what it is and what it does. Next is our annual II, another one of those unfunded state mandates from the Mass DEP that we continue our II investigation. And this year, it's going to be a cost of $137,630. And this will be all, goes towards the sewer ratepayers, comes out of the sewer enterprise fund. Whether it's, and if you remember last year, we put these in the budget, and you didn't see these last year. Well, it didn't work out that way. So we took them out of the budget, and they have to go to town meeting for a vote. It has to be clear of where these funds are going. If you want to get more into it, Cal is going to have to come up and explain, because it's a legal explanation of why, because when she does her closing out of the books, correct? Her tax recap, this is not being shown it has to be in town meeting to be voted. So she says it has to be in town meeting to be voted. It's got to be in town meeting to be voted. It's good enough for me. It's good. And I think lastly, there's, no, the analyzer. So the last, we are looking for above level service budget person. I think I asked Deirdre to send it out. I hope that everybody got it for the new members. There was a study done by Paradigm back in 2020, and it was a lot of it is to right the wrongs of the past of the way people have been paid through the DPW fund. I looked at one of the first budgets I did in 2008, 6. The DPW had 14 staff members, and that included all of us, the operation staff. The water department had 4.81 positions. The general fund had 5.68. Today, with 16 people, the water department has 5 full-time people, salaried employees, and the water we've lowered it to 3.50. This, it's tough to follow what just happened when you're talking about 27 people getting laid off. And whether this is the right year or not the right year to do this. Millis is growing. Millis has grown over the past 10 years. I see many people here, and every one of your developments in the past 10 years, the town's taken over from new people and new homes being built. And in that time, I just told you, we had 14 people that have worked here. This is the only department, the only large department that has not gotten an increase with people, one person. There was a town meeting, we got one person, there was a town meeting, and we lost that person. He got laid off, we laid off, and he came back in water sewer general. The complaints that we get, why aren't you doing this, why aren't you doing that, why aren't you maintaining ball fields, why aren't you cleaning up? Mr. Michael, I'm Jim, and I'm the Director of Public Works, and if you ever go on Millis Facebook, I'm the person that they love so much. I'm the most popular person on that, of why we're not doing what, and everything else. because we don't have the staff to do it. People can look at and say, 16 people, but, I gave you a survey of what other towns have, and I hope you looked at it. It's all right here. I can go into, and we had a great discussion in Town Hall about this, 36 people in Medway, 36 full-time people that work for the DPW in Medway. Medway's not that much bigger than Millis. It is bigger, but it's not that much bigger than Millis. Road miles, I think it's like maybe 4, maybe 5 miles more a roadway. Developments, they have more developments. Population, I think they're like 13, 14,000. Millis, very shortly, could be approaching 10,000 people, or at 9,000 something, and we're getting there. In discussions with people here, why don't we do more? Well, there's just so much that can be done. And again, maybe this isn't the year for it, but I'm here to advocate for the Millis DPW. And if I don't do it, no one else is going to do it. So, I don't know if we want to get into the discussion of the percentages that I presented to the Select Board last night and what that mythology is. What a mythology is, just a math figuring of what needs to be done. Any questions? I would hope we have on $5.5 million. I hope somebody has something to ask something.
On the DPW staffing and in relation to new developments, when a new development comes through its approval process, whether it be planning board or select board, number of committees in town, is the DPW ever asked to review, to provide comment on those developments?
Yeah, we oversee the infrastructure. If it's good, if the town takes it over, the DPW actually has the final sign-off,
Is that-
which is the select board.
But that's that final sign-off. Do you do it up front when it comes time to approving those?
Well,
The reason I ask, I'll just cut to the chase. I don't mean to play stump the dummy
Yeah.
here. But I would say you should, and you should tell them what you think the cost will be to what you need for resources to
Again,
maintain those developments.
almost every one of those developments I approved them as a 12-year member of the planning board. And I do continue to be part of that discussion. So
I'd give them a number. Here's the
Yeah.
estimated FTE, whether it's a tenth, whatever it is, so that you
But
can,
you-
after the fact, it's too late.
It's not. I mean, if you look at the guidelines that are set forth, I mean, to me, I think there's a lot of unfair things that are put onto a development that's paying the same taxes as anybody in the town, and paying rates for, why should everybody have to maintain sewer lift stations? Because it's in the original design, and that's what you're buying into when you move into a development. In almost every new development that has a lift station, they have to maintain it. And in the last 3 projects that were done, Glen Ellen, they own 3 lift stations. They have to maintain them, but everybody still pays sewer rates. Charles River Estates, they have to pay for that station. What's the other one? There's many more. There's 6 of them total that pay for lift stations. And you're still paying the same exact sewer bill that everybody else is paying, but you're also paying to maintain that. So those were decisions that were made when Millis was, in the past 15 years, when developments were put forward.
My point, though, is that if there's a cost to the DPW to maintain the roads, shouldn't you have the opportunity to say, this is what it's gonna cost in FTEs, and those add up over time? so
Oh, I've
that-
done that. I've done that, and it's just
Keep doing
been- It's been pushed aside, and it's been.
Listen, everybody's gonna ask for something, you've seen it.
Yep,
And it
yep.
doesn't all get approved, but you have to keep asking.
though
And I applaud you
it's-
for doing it.
It's been 16 years of asking for it, and in the 16 years, we've gotten one full-time
Okay,
person.
all right.
Um,
I don't fault you for that.
No,
I'm just-
I get it. It's, let's be honest, if we're having the discussion, the DPW is, in the food chain is low on the totem pole. And there's no joking about it, it's the truth. And that's everywhere. But, yes,
Go ahead, Jody, I'm still formulating.
I notice that license fees are up across all divisions. Can you explain why that
Sure.
is?
so license and fees, that's part of that mythology that I was just, the word I used, and hopefully I'm using it correctly. We had a paradigm study that was done, and the person that came in that actually did the study, he was a retired town administrator, and he worked, and he helped us through this process of finalizing how we were to regulate all the different funds and how they, enterprise funds, and how they should be charged. He suggested to us that we take the licenses that we require our operators, our water operators, and take them and separate all the different licenses. And I think if you look at, if you look at the page I gave you with David Ramachi's name at the top of it,
It's in here somewhere.
it's in there. And it was in today's, I think, presentation that Deirdre sent out, left you. And this is the first FY '24 that we're actually showing it in the budget. It's still part of the salary of the individual person. So it's not an increase, that part is not an increase. It's still in that $1,000,000-something thousand. So if you take, I think you have to look at this for me to best explain it, if you can find that this page.
Yeah.
So if you have Mr. Ramachi, he's the DPW superintendent. I did speak to him. He knows I'm talking about this. So if you look at the first, over the corner, his base pay is $35.82. His licenses are $7.95, which his hourly rate is $43.77. As I said at the selectmen's meeting the other night, contractually, we have to pay him that $43.77 an hour for no matter what he does when he works for the town of Millis. In the contract of the DPW, ASME contract that we have, it states that there are no licenses. It's all it's all their salary. It's all built into their salary. There's much discussion and much disagreement, and mostly coming from me, that I don't believe that this breakdown that you see on the bottom should be there. I don't think that we're following the contract, but the select board chose to continue to use this formula. A simple answer to your question, let's just say Mr. Ramachi was out, he came in yesterday at 8 o'clock, he went home this morning, from the snowstorm last night. After 12 hours, his pay rate goes to the double time at $87.54. So for from, I think it was like 7 o'clock last night until this morning, he was paid $87.54. If you look at the water rate, so you take that $6.32, the water rate payers would charge that $6.32
While he's plowing.
while he's plowing, not the general fund. So if he's up on Causeway Street, plowing Causeway Street that has no water,
Right.
the water rate payers are paying that $6.32. And that's just one person. There's 7 people that have licenses that, mate a lot of, his costs. He's a higher paid, he's the highest paid person we have. And that's why I wanted to show it. And there are other breakdowns, as you see, that some go to stormwater, some go to sewer, to come to that $87.54.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that the part of his pay that is for the additional licenses that he has get allocated to all these different buckets, the water, general, stormwater, and sewer.
Yep.
And so that, under, I forget which budget I was looking at.
So if you
Let's
look at
just
the
say like
water,
DPW, under general fund, DPW license fee that is the allocation of employee time
No,
based on their
no,
licenses?
no, that's,
Okay.
that's what he gets paid, what you see in the budget is what he gets paid on an hourly rate, and it's broken down that way. That's for his 40 hours. The overtime comes, it's not part of that, it's just part of the overtime budget. And we have to fund that, because you can't guess at what it is. I mean,
Sure.
we have no idea how many hours he works. So whether there's an overtime line item in there, and if it could go into deficit.
Okay. So the licenses and fees line item that's in the budget is employee time?
That's employees' 40-hour time. Of the 7 people, if you're looking at water,
Well, I'm just looking at DPW general fund, where,
okay, so that's for the general contractor, and that's for, the general contractor it's part of the 4G license. And, yeah, that's all it comes
so
out at.
it's a way of allocating employee time to that line item.
Correct.
But it's really, it's like part of wages, much like when we see the police budget, we see all the different kind of line items, but it's all more or less wages.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Laura?
And, Mr. McKay, so looking at the breakdown, what's separating the general, it's, look at the first column, regular rate, 3582, and then it's water general, stormwater general. How come there's different line items that are the same?
Well, there's different licenses. If you look at the last column, it's, that all makes up with all the different licenses.
Okay, thank you.
All the different licenses.
Mr. Underhill?
So, Mr. McKay, you used the plowing as a good example for this breakdown. What's your fix for this? So say he works on a water main that breaks.
Yep.
Are you gonna break down granularly? Okay, that should all be billed to the water enterprise fund?
So when somebody
And
works.
How
a
will
wa-
that be managed?
Yep,
That's-
so when somebody works a water main break, it's all overtime. Most of the time, I shouldn't say not all the time, not 90% of the time, a water main break is overtime. Then he, as he's working, depending on what his split is, if his water part will go to water, and everything else from the general will go towards water for the water main break, yes.
Is that manageable?
We do manage it. You know, it's done by, you know, if you look at the last page I gave you, and I think that's why I gave it to you, if you take a look at his hourly rates, that's what he puts in, and then in each one of these line items, it says DPW town. See all the breakdowns?
Yep, okay, thank you.
Ms. Johnston?
So when all of the license fees and so it would be their base salary originally, like $87, then it's broken down based on what their base is, and then all their license fees go to their associated, wherever the enterprise is that license is required. As far as the employee, when they're recording it, we have the Munis Employee Self-Service, and my team has worked on behind the scenes. The employee puts their 8 hours in, it automatically calculates it through to wherever their, excuse me, wherever their licenses are supposed to go, based on what the license they hold. So it's seamless to the employee.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other than when they get their paycheck, and it's this long. Because
Like a
it shows all
CVS
this,
receipt,
it
huh?
shows, like Carol just said, this little 8 hours, what he puts in 8 hours, whatever it is, it could be 3 different, 4 different, and then his license and the breakdown. Again, I think that what everybody has to remember, contractually, there are no licenses. There are no licenses. It's a base rate of $43.77. There is one stipend that's given to different people. They get $100 if they have a D2 combined license, water licenses. Everything else is base salary of $43.77. And this breakdown here, and that's where the difference of opinion comes from.
Okay. Anybody else?
Of course, of course. That community paradigm agreement report, did everybody on this board get that?
I believe so.
I didn't.
Yes, we did.
Okay. I really stress that everybody should read this because
Deidre emailed it to us about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it was in that.
I'll send it to you tomorrow.
Thank you.
The-
I don't
Joe-
have it as a printout.
Jody was part of the team that worked on this. This is how far back it goes. Now, could you please just refresh, I'm under the impression that the DPW hand tallied since 2017
That's
the
correct.
way the funds were distributed. And I see that finally this is the first year, and I don't know have people agreed that your timesheets do show the new percentages that you're proposing?
So
You have backup, I'm just saying, just a yes or no. You have backup from them from your staff that shows that, well, we're taking away a large fund from Jonathan Wanders on the DPW general, and we're moving him over to water and sewer. You can show through the time slips that he is working where this is?
yes,
Okay. And back in, now I know that money is tight and everything, but back in this report stated that there should be, I believe, 5 DPW staff hired, general
yes,
staff, 4 or
yes.
5?
yes.
Which is, and how many have been hired since this report?
There was one full-time person was hired, and we corrected the transfer station
Oh,
at a 75%.
no, new bodies.
New
When they
bodies
say-
was one.
One, okay. So here in the 8 years, we've got 1 new person. So, and then again, when people say, why isn't trash picked up on the side of the road? Oh, they're over in Sherburne doing it. Yeah, they got 15 people picking up trash in the way they are. We don't. And like you said, the DPW is like the bottom feeder. Other departments with large budgets, they just come in and they need it because of life and limb. But the DPW, and to me, if you go to the planning board and say, well, this is gonna cost me so much, what, are they gonna deny it because we don't have the staff for it? I
That's not
mean,
what
we
I was-
know.
It's not what I
Okay.
was advocating for.
Okay, I just.
I'm advocating that he go on record so that the town has a record, similar to what you just asked, that is there a record of allocation of hours? I'm asking for a record so that Mr. McKay can come forward every time and he can say, I told you so, that CRE was gonna cost this much to maintain. I needed this many bodies.
That's a
And over
good point.
time, that adds up. That's all I'm asking.
But doesn't the number of miles on accepted streets do the same thing?
So what happens with the miles on, it all goes onto Chapter 90, and we get
Okay,
Chapter 90
so
funding for
how,
that.
I would be curious to see, since 2018, whenever this report was done, 2019, 2020, how many roads have been added since then? And then how much staff has been added?
Yep.
Miles and miles of it, all the subdivisions. I think now's the time, finally, that bad time of year, but it be, the general fund has got to start absorbing this, because the water and sewer, you mentioned Charles Rivers, prices are going up. Everything now with another PFAS facility that maybe the feds won't give us the money like they did. How much more can people throw on the water and sewer fund, Mr. Chair, that's not allocated? So the thing that should happen is that all the hours that are used for snow and ice removal should come from a snow and ice fund.
Which it,
His $80 an hour should
Agreed.
come from snow and ice, not $3 from this one and $2 from this one. Let's be honest and tell the people, how much does it cost to remove the snow?
that was my plea last Monday night with the Select Board. I pleaded with them to look at these splits, and to take to heart that there is no licenses. There is none. It's not in their contract. They don't have it, and we did that just for that reason 5 or 6 years ago when we negotiated it all into their hourly rate, and we have the contract where it is. You did mention 2 things that I did not bring up. Why the budgets aren't complete yet, and they're probably gonna have to come back very shortly, is the Charles River Pollution District. We have an increase, we're looking at least at the very minimum, they vote on it this Thursday night, it's coming up next week, of at least 11%. 11% on both the OPM and the other.
And then how much does the general fund provide for that?
Nothing.
Okay.
Well, other than paying their bills.
Yeah.
Other than paying their bills. In the indirect costs, Now that all the contracts are settled, I've asked the finance office to give me the final budgets and the salary increases, so we can finalize. That's something new we're doing, the DPW is doing for the first time this year. We're finalizing the indirect cost line item. We finally got the health insurance, so until that's done, we don't know exactly how much is going to be paid back from each one of the three enterprise funds back into. I think if you add all three of them up, it's upwards of almost $700,000. And with a larger increase, it could even go more. And what that means is that the water ratepayers are paying, the sewer ratepayers, and the stormwater ratepayers are paying for what is necessary in this building, for the finance office to do their work, the town administrator's office, the treasurer collector's office, and the breakdown of insurance and stuff like that. So we don't have that ready yet, and hopefully we'll have it ready very shortly.
Last word is yours, Mr. McKay.
Michael's.
Mr. Cron.
Sorry. So Route 109, State Highway, Route 1.
It's not.
Well,
No.
Did you assume the responsibility of that?
We did.
You did.
And we got the Chapter 90 funding for that.
Okay. And 115, same thing?
Same thing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKay.
Thank you.
Mr. Kaczynski.
Good job, Peter.
Thank you. So this is not,
Yes, you can
Okay.
throw out your old first draft warrant. Copy of that. This is one of the presses.
Thank you, sir.
it's the exact same as this. The wartime at home that's organized.
Could I just ask, Mr. Chair, that we be given dates at the bottom of every
Yes, I
paginate
realized
and
that
dates?
this evening,
Okay.
yes. So I'd ask everyone to put a little date in the corner of that document, so you know that warrant, it says draft on it, but you know it's from today.
We used to have to do it at work for the,
So hot off the presses, it didn't get a date. All right. Mr. Chairman, I think I'm going to begin, I think I'm on the agenda to discuss insurance. But I just gave the board some information in regards to health insurance as well as our general insurance. So I'm going to go through a little of that. I'm not going to talk about every item, because some items, the costs really haven't shifted much, unless there's questions from the committee. But the first sheet I wanted to talk about is this one that has the big insurance on the side. First, talk about the general insurance, which is basically our property casualty liability for the town. You'll see that we've got quite a big increase we're putting in for. Maya is our insurer, and they do sub some of that insurance out, but Maya is our general insurer for the town. And they did have a general, across-the-board 6% increase in their premiums. But on top of that, this is a result of many vehicles and new buildings fully coming online in the town. So when we build new buildings and we buy new vehicles, our insurance goes up. And so that is the large part for that increase in the general insurance line. So I don't know if there's any questions about our general insurance, and that's, other than health insurance, that's generally our most expensive insurance line item.
Any questions?
So the other two on that list, I just want to touch upon are the police accident, fire accident. Those are large increases as well. We've had some unfortunate experience in history in the past couple of years in regards to that. And in general, those types of police accident, fire accident insurances, the premiums have gone up quite a bit, and our experience has not been great, so that has affected those increases.
Can you go into more detail? That's a little too cryptic.
Well, the fire and police, we've had some injuries, on-the-job injuries.
Okay.
And that have people out for an extended period of time. upwards of 6 months to a year in some cases. And when those occur, our premiums go up quite a bit. And so we've had a number of those in those departments. Unfortunately, those jobs come with their risks. And that is the reason for those costs going up.
Okay, thank you.
So the next sheet I want to talk about, unless there's any other questions on that sheet, is the employee benefits, which is one of our large fixed costs for our different types of insurance, as well as Norfolk County Retirement, Medicare, and so on. The two items I was going to focus on was number one, the health insurance, which we have in there an increase of about $280,000. That is approximately the GIC is saying that's about a 6% increase, but that's on average. It depends on what type of insurance from the GIC the different employees here have. So the overall increase was closer to 8%. In addition, we have, because we've had some additional hires at the school, we've added some additional health insurance. I think 4 family and 6 singles we've added to that to make sure we have sufficient health insurance premiums for next year. Obviously, we can adjust that in the fall if we need to, but we wanted to make sure we had sufficient funds there to handle the insurance adjustments. So it has been a little bit of a volatile insurance market, and unfortunately, we just received these rates from the GIC 2 days ago. So they're very fresh, and we're just putting them into the budget now. The only other really large item,
Can I just ask a question about that,
Ms.
Mr. Chair?
McGinnis. Sure.
We've talked for years, you and I, about offering a sort of a buyout so that if a spouse has similar insurance, if you don't use the town, they're going to get a little, has that been pursued at all?
we've discussed that, and it's
Okay.
something that we're looking at doing. What would happen if we had something like that put in place, and some towns do that, just to give the committee a little background, is that some towns offer an incentive, maybe $2,000, $3,000 a year in lieu of insurance. The employee would still have to prove that they have insurance from another source, because as an employer, we're required.
Not a municipal source.
Well, it could be
You'd have-
another municipal source from another town. So
Oh, I
if
didn't
you
think
have
so.
if you have an
That's good.
employee from town and their spouse works in another town, they could get the insurance from the other town. And you know,
Yeah.
that $2,000 or $3,000 might be the difference to have someone go off the town's insurance, which would be a net savings. So it's something we've talked about. We're definitely gonna take a good look at it in the upcoming year, to move on that. But we're in the GIC, we're gonna be in this year and next year, and we'll be, you know, once you're in, you're locked in for at least 2 years. So we're in this year, next year, and we'll look at other options again the year after that. Some of the problem with trying to choose which insurance to get is we don't get the rates until around March 15th, and we have to decide on December 1st if we're gonna stay or not. So we kinda have to decide if we're gonna buy the car before we know what the price is, so to speak.
Group insurance. You asked on GIC if you want to.
Oh, I'm sorry, the
Yeah.
group insurance, the GIC is the Group Insurance Commission, and that is the state health insurance. So that's the health insurance policy that all the state employees are on. So a number of years ago, I think about maybe 10, 12 years ago, the state allowed municipalities to join, and I think there's about 40 municipalities that are on the state's health insurance plan.
And under the GIC
Yes.
are all these different plans?
That's correct. So
Your-
the
that
other
staff
sheets you see.
members can, okay.
Right, so under that second sheet, you'll see that the difference in the FY '23 appropriation and the proposed, as well as a listing of all the family plans and individual plans that are being offered by the GIC in fiscal year '24. There's been a large shift this coming year in the types of plans they offer. So we're not sure at this point. There's several plans that are no longer gonna be offered, so employees will be pushed off of that, and they'll have a choice of joining any one of the other ones. Without knowing what they're going to join, it's hard to predict what the costs are
Cost is
going to
gonna
be. So
this
that's
is
why,
like the connector. This is similar to the connector that,
I suppose it's the state
Residents get-
employee version of
Right,
that.
okay.
And I'm not extremely familiar with the connector, but I will say on this, they have a lot of choices, and those choices have different price ranges, which would have different
coverages and
cost
all that.
impacts for the community. And so this is it's an uncertain year because of it. We don't know. Most years, we only have a couple people switch plans. This year, there's gonna be a much higher number because of some plans are no longer going to be offered. You'll see there's no tough plans offered anymore, generally. And, you know, there's a few others that have merged.
Mike
this
has
is all-
nothing to do with that.
This is all decided by
Not in
folks
your
at the
office.
state, yeah, by the state government.
No, I know, no,
Yeah.
I was just wondering if it would made more sense to try and have only like 3 insurances that they all
This
can,
is-
you know,
Yeah,
pick
under-
up, so that the rates could be better.
Yeah, well,
'Cause I
I
know
can
that-
certainly put you in touch with the state commission if you wanna chat with them, because I understand they do offer a lot, which may drive up the cost a little bit, but it's the offering. They did look at that last year to limit the number of options, but they backed down. There was a lot of backlash to that, and they backed down.
I
But,
just know businesses usually negotiate, I know it's municipality, but I know that large businesses usually negotiate with insurance companies and get the best rate, and then their employees have anywhere, maybe 2 or 3 insurance companies, or even just one insurance company they go through and they can pick a tier.
Right.
So,
So these are all fixed by the state. We have no say in any of this.
damn state, I'm
So, really, these are the options the
Jody
employees
said the
have.
prices seem okay.
Okay.
What's the percentage?
70-30 in general.
Is that what you have, 70/30?
70-30, so the town picks up 70%? Yeah.
which is
And so, different towns do different things. I was at a managers meeting earlier today, and some of those managers, they had either 80-20 or 85-15, which are that's very expensive for the community.
50/50 though, too, somehow.
There's a few that
mention
are
that.
50-50. That's the minimum allowed under state law. But most of them, it's 70-30. I think we have one of the more expensive plans that it's a 50-50.
Mr. Kaczynski, are any of these issues part of the union negotiations? Is it-
The only thing that would be part of the union negotiations would be whether or not to leave the GIC. As far as what the plan is and what's offered, the unions have no say in that.
What about the match? The match percent?
The match has been negotiated, so if the town wished to change that, that would have to be negotiated and actually bargained
Just curious.
in all the contracts.
Thank you.
The only other item that I plan to bring up, but I'm happy to talk about any of it, the Norfolk County retirement. As you can see, it's a rather large increase from $2,391,581 to $2,742,218. That is a Norfolk County retirement assessment that we have no control over whatsoever. I mean, you could take our guesses as to why there was such a jump. It may be the market history. They have certain goals they're trying to meet with a certain period of time to fully fund the retirement system. And when the stock market drops, they increase the assessments. That's generally what they do. So it does vary year to year. You can see the past 8-year history, and you can see the different costs, and they have gone up quite a bit in the last 8 or 9 years. I don't know if anyone had any questions about anything on the list. Again, there's some of these items are pretty minor, but, and then if not, I was going to touch upon just an update to the annual town meeting warrant. And just to there has been a minor change. There's been some changes to some of the details, but, so just to go through the warrant, briefly again, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like me to just go, or I'll go quickly.
By exception?
Article 1, again, a standard article, unpaid bills. We're currently working on those. So that's for, just again, for those who may not know, that's for prior year, for whatever reason, if they're prior year bills that haven't gotten paid, they would be listed here. Article 2, again, this is basically a balancing article for any departmental budgets that may be slightly, look like they may go over budget. We try to do transfers from one departmental budget to another and try to balance those, so that those departments can make it to the end of the fiscal year. We're also working on a list of those items. Article 3 is
Could I
our.
just ask a question about Article 2, Mr.
Sure.
Kaczynski, please? Do you know what, if any departments now are going to be showing a deficit? You know,
We do keep an eye on them, and we do check and look, try to project if any departments are at risk of being in deficit, and what we'll try to do is we'll try to shift some funds around to make sure they don't go into deficit, and we talk to those department heads and speak with them about their budgets and to make sure that they're aware and they watch their spending closely. Every year, we do have a few. I will say this year, our town buildings account might be in risk of that because of a lot of the HVAC issues we've had here that we've had to deal with. And there are a few other budgets we're just keeping an eye on.
How's the police overtime? That's always a,
I know, I'd have to look at that. I
Yeah.
can't answer off the top of
Yeah,
my
yeah.
head,
No, I'm
but,
just-
I-
yeah.
but we do take a look at that and track that, and I know the finance director works with the town accountant to
Thank you.
do a check on that, so that's currently being reviewed, so that we will have a list within the next couple of weeks of what we think needs to happen in order to safely finish out the fiscal year.
This probably is a better question, well, in part, I should be asking it twice, once the school board and once here, maybe for Carol. But Mike, does the town, either the town or the school, have the ability to pay any expenses ahead in any of its contracts?
We're
Use
not
20
supposed to do that.
there are some limited
There
circumstances.
may be some exceptions.
Right.
But generally, we're not allowed to do that, I don't believe.
The only exception to that is for the school, that they can use their circuit breaker money to prepay for out-of-district tuitions for up to 3 months.
But generally, we cannot pay for something until the product
Right.
has
Bona
been
fide.
received or the
Exactly.
services have been rendered.
Been performed, right.
Because sometimes we get something from a vendor saying, oh, we need $1,000 deposit. We're like, nope, that's not happening. So we can either work on that, or we can try to find another vendor. That's usually what we tell them.
Okay, thank you.
So, again, Article 3 is our general budget, which I'm sure you'll be, continue to be up to your ears in, moving forward over the next few weeks. Article 4, under state law, town meeting needs to ratify municipal collective bargaining agreements, and we've listed those contracts there.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Andrea?
Fully realizing this question's going to get me to sign this article, will we be given copies of the contracts to review before making recommendations?
Yes, yes, you will. They all exist. The SEIU was just ratified 2 days ago. That was the last one. So we can certainly send, email you all a copy for your next
Please
meeting,
email.
so you have those.
Thank you.
Give you some background for any of the budget issues. Article 5, 6, and 7 are the standard enterprise fund operating budget articles. Article 8 is our consent article, which addresses our personnel plan. And just to make the Finance Committee aware, the Board of Selectmen did vote for a 2% COLA for the personnel plan at their meeting Monday night, which pretty much matches most of the union contracts.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Underhill?
Again, sorry, but, so is there a reason why this is a consent article? I remember clearly that this didn't go down so well at town meeting. Is there another way to structure this, or does it have to be in the form of a consent
The
article?
only other way would be to just separate these out and do them one article at a time. And generally, the select board and I consult with the moderator and town council about the best way to proceed with these. If it's deemed that it's problematic to do them by consent, that we can separate them back out. It's more to streamline the town meeting for items that generally don't have as much debate, so that there's more time and patience for the town meeting members to address the more important articles on the warrant.
So it was considered, though? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any questions on consent Article 8? That's, again, that's a pretty standard every year, but, again, they're things that by statute have to be approved by town meeting every year.
Is the Recreation Committee Chair's request to move to amend the Recreation Department's budget back into revolving fund getting any traction at the Select Board?
The select board have not formally addressed that yet. They're aware of it, and they're reviewing it. Certainly, if there's any feedback that the Finance Committee would like to get back to them, I'd be happy to do it, but they have not. They've received the request, but they're still looking at the whole budget and taking that into consideration with the whole budget process.
Thank you.
Article 9 is the standard capital article. I know that the capital committee will be meeting again tomorrow night and has been meeting very regularly. And John's been doing a great job on that, representing the finance committee. They have a number of capital items that they're reviewing, and I'd expect
They're not going to sit next to each
they're
other.
going to start grading those items or reviewing and marking them up. They've already met with all the proponents. They're gonna rank them, rate them at their meeting tomorrow night. So we should have something back to the Finance Committee fairly soon on that. Articles 10 and 11 are both for funding for design and construction of sidewalks and roads, as well as tree removal maintenance. Those are just placeholders right now. Obviously, with the current budget situation, it's very tenuous whether any of that will be possible this year, but they're simply there at this point as a placeholder for the board to consider before they finalize the warrant. Article 12, this isn't as much a funding article as it is an authorization article. If the Millis Schools looking to lease, get authorization to lease any school buses, this would give that formal authorization, and that would require a 2/3 vote. But the funding for any such lease would be within the school's budget. The same is true for Article 13. This is an authorization.
Go ahead, Mr. Crum.
I hope that when they do look at a new lease for police cruisers, they reconsider the blackout militaristic cruisers that we have.
That's terrible.
I mean, it's just, I don't know why we have blackout cruisers, but it just doesn't seem to meet the serve and protect edict of the police department. It's a good police department, but I just don't understand. I don't see this in really any other community.
Norfolk. They're identical.
I haven't been to Norfolk in a while.
Stay away.
Have you met with the police chief yet on his budget?
No.
I think he's presenting next week.
So certainly something you can discuss with him. I will certainly raise it with him when I am meeting with him on some items tomorrow. I'll certainly bring that up to him to, have him be prepared to speak to the committee about and hear the feedback from the committee in regards to that. So. Article 14 was submitted by the Energy Committee. So certainly I think, this is in spirit with what I think the Commonwealth is trying to do. And I would recommend, if you'd like to look into this a little more, get a little more feedback, that you invite a member of the committee as well as Mr. Weiss to come in and discuss it in the Finance Committee.
Can you clarify what you said? You said that it was submit by the Energy Committee.
Yes.
Was it submit by the Energy, did the Energy Committee request that the Select Board include it in the warrant, or is it similar to a citizen's petition?
No, the Energy Committee requested the Select Board to
And they
submit it.
opted to include.
They have,
Thank
it is in here, yes. So it's not a petition article.
Thank you.
Article 15, this was put forward by the Board of Health. It's again, I would probably recommend you have a representative from the Board of Health come in to discuss this and the background of this. But it's my understanding, the main driver of this was that they had received a lot of feedback that the current plastic bag bylaw is confusing. And I think they were hoping to streamline it and perhaps put a few tweaks into it. But again, I would recommend you ask them to come in and discuss the background of that. Article 16, that's our standard unemployment insurance article. And Carol is keeping a good eye on those amounts. And we're looking at whether or not we would need to put funds in now or whether that could be put in at the fall, but we're looking at that currently. Article 17, again, other post-employment benefits, it's something that the town should be putting funds into. And again, subject to the same budget pressures that all these other items are under. Article 18, this is a fairly new legislation to establish a special education stabilization fund. And essentially, this would, if the school, with the consent of the school committee and the town meeting, this fund could be set up, funds could be placed in it, and there are a lot of rules associated with this account, but essentially, certain types of special education costs could be paid out of this account, focusing mostly on out-of-district tuition and transportation. And those bills could only be paid with an approval of both the select board and the school committee. So a lot of towns I'm aware of are setting up these funds to try to deal with, it doesn't magically create money, the town would have to put funds into it, but it does provide a mechanism to tap into for, volatility in the special ed costs that come up during the year. So it's something that the select board is considering as maybe an avenue and a methodology to keep funds in to assist the school with the volatility of special education costs. Article 19, our stabilization fund, again, I think it's more likely we'd be looking to the fall to put funds into that because of the budget pressures currently being experienced by the town. Article 20 is the petition article. I think you've already met with that petitioner. And that's it as we stand. We have 20 articles. The select board will be reviewing this at every one of their regular meetings. They are scheduled to sign this on April 10th, but certainly, we'll provide all the information to you as it comes in, so you have time to discuss these items and vet them for your own recommendation, so.
Ms. Johnston, there was a question a couple weeks ago pertaining to stabilization funds and whether the I guess the other stabilization funds beyond the primary are factored into a town's resources and included in the bond rating. You emailed us, I think, an answer, which was
Right.
10 miles over my head, and it doesn't
I
take much to
believe
do
it's
that.
it would be all stabilization funds would be included in the total that's looked at. But the one that's important to the investors is the policy that the town has. So the policy we have for our stabilization fund is it's 5% of our budget. So that's something that people need to
And-
take into consideration.
So is it safe for us to infer that if we would be abiding by our policy if we factored in all the stabilizations into the calculation of the 5% or not?
No, I think
Only the stabilization?
the stabilization, because if you, as far as it goes, my understanding for the special needs stabilization fund, it can only be 2% of their net school spending. and that's all that can go in there. So that's the requirement. And for the money to be spent out of that fund, it has to be for special ed expenses that were not included in the budget, they were unexpected in that budget year. It's not to supplement the budget.
Much
Right.
like our stabilization fund
Exactly,
policy. Okay.
exactly.
That it
It's
can't
an
just be
emergency
used
fund.
Like we rate it all the time. It has to
Right.
be for extraordinary items.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
And so any questions on the draft warrant as it stands today overall?
Anyone?
And there was a request at the last meeting to provide just copies of the job descriptions for the executive office. So
Thank you.
those are in your packet for you to take a look at your leisure. And just to let you know, in light of the financial constraints, that above-level service request is being withdrawn for this coming year. We're going to review the situation, but it may come up in a future year, but we'll try the best to make by with our current allotments we currently have. So be happy to answer any general questions you have, or...
I do, but it's not really about the budget, it's just about, so maybe when you're done with the budget, just to discuss something about, thing that really impressed me, Mr. Gazinski, when I voted for you, was that in the town you came from, you had a very close relationship with the school committee. I remember you were involved in the contracts, negotiations, because you were a small town and you worked well together. Is there ever a point, like, the school gives people extra money for 3 years to let them know. The town doesn't offer anything like that. Is it?
In retirement.
In retirement. Give us a 3-year notice, which, is anyone checking what's going on over there to see if it's approving within their means? This could be a conversation for another time, Mr. Chair, but at some point, they always say sped will never be lower the next year than it was the previous year, is what you're hearing. It's just more and more kids are coming in that need help. And that's
Yeah.
all I have to say about that, Mike. It really impressed me when you were so closely involved with the school and it was a turning point for me.
Yeah, what I will say is, I do have a good relationship with the school administration. I don't talk directly as much with the school committee. I feel I kind of work through the school administration. We do have a great working relationship. A lot of the issues are the same. We dealt with the same special education struggles of rising costs in Douglas. And we tried to work the best we could with them there, as we'll do here. I know we've had several meetings with the superintendent and the business manager over the last month or so. We're going to meet again next week. And certainly, we're trying to continue to grow that relationship. When I arrived, there wasn't a very
No,
good
there
working
wasn't.
relationship.
No, there
I think it's
wasn't.
improved quite a bit, but there's always room for further improvement, so we're working on that.
Thank you.
And, it's a continually work in progress, but we do work cooperatively with them and try to communicate as much as possible to make sure that they're aware of where we're at to the extent that we can. There's a lot of people involved in these processes. Local government's complicated in that way, but democracy's complicated. So that's just, it's cumbersome. But, I will try to even more improve that working relationship. But, I think it's a good working relationship right now. It's just that we're all feeling the pressure from different budgetary pressures on the town, so.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, thank you. Anything else for Mr. Gazinski or Ms. Johnston before I ask them to leave? No, I'm actually not asking them to leave. Okay,
All right, thank you very
Thank you very much for your time. We have some minutes to approve.
Do you want to skip the other?
Did we not? Sorry. Bills, no, I don't. Bills payable, where's that?
I don't.
That
we
was
already did it.
listed as postponed.
Okay. Board liaison, okay, so we don't necessarily need to cover the school board. Were there any other committees, including the school board, if those that went last night, or the select board on Monday, want to discuss or provide updates?
My only comment, Mr. Chair, is to Mike's comment about the presentation last night at the school committee. That was, it's a wonderful document, and as well as for the vocational school, it's a wonderful document online. There's great resources to continue to go through the details.
The big topic at the select board meeting was definitely the vote, Tri-County School, their presentation. The big takeaway was that they're including, that $280 million includes a lot of construction that will not be reimbursed by the state through MSBA, because it includes a lot of fields, a number of, what we certainly haven't done. We went through the austerity program for Clyde Brown, whether it looks like it or not, and kept costs small, kept them, one would say manageable and defendable. It appears not to be the case with with Tri-County. Mr. Schultz was pretty fired up as far as he gets, and I think directly told the rep who gave the briefing, was the superintendent, and I forget her name. I have it written down. But anyway, nonetheless, gave that feedback. I don't think it changes much. The process is that there will be a vote of simple majority of counting votes. It's not counting communities, it's counting actual votes, individual votes in the aggregate for a simple majority. In which case, if it passes, if and when it passes, then it's up to the town to figure out how to fund it, what the portion is, and that number will go up and down over the life of the borrowing. So, there's a lot of challenges ahead of us. Can't lose sight of that one, can't lose sight of the MSBA for our own middle school, high school, which, by the way, has passed a milestone this week or this month. And so that's moving forward too. So there's a lot of budget challenges that are getting discussed. And
All at
I just think it's really super important that we do, attend and if not attend, make sure that we get updates from whoever does go, just so that we're staying informed. Go ahead, Joyce.
No, I was just going to say that I'm sorry. I was just going to say that the conversation on Monday night, what I noticed was that they did not, one of the reasons we're not being reimbursed is because they went out of the size parameters. And had they stayed in some of the parameters that the state requires, they would have been, more money would have been given to them. That's the understanding I got from it. Yeah.
There's, I think, 5 new fields going on, and I don't know that the state has standards for vocational lab space and shop space and things like that. I simply don't know, but I do know for a fact that they don't pay for site work and fields, and that is all included in, a massive new complex. I work in manufacturing. I'd love to see a revived vocational technical program, locally. We search high and low for machinists. It's extremely hard. That's our constraint for growth, is finding qualified and interested machinists. So I have nothing against vocational technology. I do have a problem with $280 million.
89 million.
So,
And that's to be split, that's 11 communities that participate in Tri-County. But that was one of the things I was trying to say, that we have 38 students currently using Tri-County. And for a $289 million school, I just think it's going to be, it's a lot of money. I did speak to Jane Harden about it, though, and she's on there. She was here Monday night for the select board's meeting, and she is a representative for their school committee. And I spoke with her, and she said that she's expressed the concerns that, people have, and she's expressed it, but she's only one person. And I did explain to her how our own town is in such a deficit and what we're facing as far as a high school. And she did say that at her next meeting, she will bring up the fact that we are, in our school system itself, the deficit we're in, and the need for our school, so.
Are we the only town that's opposing it?
I don't know that we're opposing it.
Oh, you don't?
I mean, I don't speak for, I don't speak for anybody else at the ballot box.
No, I'm just saying with the vice chair.
I get the sense that everybody's choking on $290 million, but,
Have we heard anything from the
Write
clerk's
down what you
office
want
about
me
the
to
window
ask
of
her.
voting? From what I understood, Mr. Chair, that the town clerks will get together and decide if it's gonna be a 4-hour or 8-hour window for this ballot.
yeah, I asked that question at the meeting, and that's right, there will be a follow-on meeting, and they will have to come to some consensus. It'll be the same voting for all 11 communities, 4-hour to 8-hour window block of hours on a Tuesday. I think the 24th of October is a Tuesday, if I remember right. I told them that we are sensitive to voting hours and being, facilitating, as much turnout as we can for all of our demographics, but, I don't know that that'll come to a committee vote here or anyplace else, the select board. I didn't get the sense. They will, it was interesting that they did say that they will fund that election or that ballot day, that voting day. That's fully funded by, already in their budget. So, I guess we're only have to fund 4 of 5 elections that were presented.
But when will we be reimbursed, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like the circuits,
Yeah.
you pay now and next year you'll get money.
So,
Mr.
Mr.
Chair,
Chair,
oh, I'm sorry.
sorry.
Do
I'm
you-
gearing up to say something.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Do you recall them saying if the 11 communities voted on this?
So, no, they
No,
didn't,
to
but
have the study.
But I asked that question since then, and the answer is that vocational schools don't have to, the upfront process is not the same as we went through. So they don't necessarily vote amongst the communities to say, do we want to enter the process? The vote that we just had in the fall.
Right.
They don't do that.
They don't,
They don't.
okay. That
So.
answers your question.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon?
so I just want to put this out there to all the folks who actually sit through and listen to our meetings. You've got to show up to vote, at town meeting, at this special election. All the money for all of this, for Tri-County, for special ed, for the schools, for the town, we're the ones who vote on it. And it's all coming out of the same pot, which is basically our pockets. So if you don't vote, basically your opinion doesn't matter.
If you don't show
You've
up-
got to show up and vote for these things.
Right.
And, I mean, this has become the topic of conversation every night at my house about how are we going to fund all of this here in Millis? How are we going to fund Tri-County? I mean, I think that Voc schools are essential in our economy and that they should be strengthened and celebrated more. $290 million, I took my breath away. I actually had to count the zeros to go, wait a minute, like that's that's 100 million, right? Right? We want to do the best we can for the kids that we have here in Millis, and we're not doing it. And we can't, because there just isn't enough money. And now we're looking at special ed costs that we have to pay. I mean, there's no way of getting around it. If we get this assessment from Tri-County, if it passes, we have to pay it. There isn't a way around it. In some ways, it feels like taxation without representation, which I get all fired up about. But when it comes time to vote, you've got to show up and vote. Like was just mentioned, it's a straight majority vote across all of these communities. The people who really care about it are the ones who are going to show up. So you've got to care about it in order for your vote to count. You've got to show up and vote. whether you support it or you don't, you've got to show up. So that's my rant for the night.
Good job.
Can I just add one thing, Mr.
Please
Chair?
do, please do.
To that point, Ms. Garzone, is, I think, my opinion is that the average resident out there doesn't realize that if all the voters show up in Millis and vote no, it still could carry forward based on all the other communities. I think it's important to communicate that message throughout now until when the voting occurs, so people have a full understanding of what's at stake. Even though, and I understand we talk about it in aggregate, and I think we understand, but I think for the tax vote, or the, not tax vote, but the voters that are out there need to understand the clarity of that.
And we have friends in other communities, and they've got to understand the impact of this
Yeah.
vote as well.
Yeah.
I just want to opine a little bit on it now. And that is, that I'm not against it, much like the senior center, I'm not against it. I'm not against the senior center, or against that senior center. Well, I'm not against this Voc Tech, rehab or renovation. I'm against that one, because $280 million is asinine. It is crazy, and it's way excessive, and that's the issue. The problem is, because we didn't participate in the early selection of options, this is what the vote is. The vote is on, it's not on choice A, B, or C, it is on this option, $290 million. And I will be voting no. I will vote, and I will encourage others to, bring a friend and try to get aware of it. Perhaps there's some advocacy and a few, John, but sometimes, not on
Depending on the
Wednesdays.
day.
Mr. Crum.
I sat on this committee 30 years ago in the town of Westwood, which looked a lot like Millis. And the biggest problem you have here is that 90 or 95%, whatever it is, of the tax base is homeowners. And the tax rate is above $18 a thousand. What has to happen is there has to be development in the town other than houses. And, that's not an easy solution. It took decades for this to happen in my last community. But at some point, the town needs to look at all this industrial land that we have and see, come up with perhaps a comprehensive plan for redevelopment of it, for utilizing it in different ways. I remember years ago driving down 109 and there was used car lot after used car lot after junkyard after junkyard after junkyard. They're gone. Thank God, they're gone. There's been improvements. There's been a lot of improvements in the town of Millis. But there's a vast amount of land sitting across from Roach Brothers. There's a vast amount of land on Route 109 that nothing's being done with. How is it possible that no one wants that spot across from Roach Brothers? The second highest two-lane road in the state.
It's incentive. You have to give companies
Exactly.
incentive
And
because
I
we're.
have no solution.
Right.
Believe me, I have no solution. Except that, if we're really gonna advance Millis, we're gonna continue to see these budgets get bigger and bigger. The tax rate can't go above 20. If it starts to go above 20, people just wanna leave. So maybe this year, maybe it's the incentive for all of us to really put a group together, do whatever it takes to really try to push development in the town, because that's gonna be our only savior. It was for Westwood. Not that Westwood is any panacea today, 30 years later, but it doesn't suffer from some of this that we're really gonna be bogged down with.
Well, one of the arguments about bringing business into the town is, and you and I had this conversation last week or the week before, Millis is considered a B town as opposed to an A town, and that means that an A town is that much closer to either 495 or 128. So there really has to be incentive for businesses to come to our town in order to open up. And I don't know what those incentives are. I don't know if it's giving, I honestly don't.
Amazingly, they just built 230 units in Medway.
Yes.
Now, you would think Medway, it's
But-
even further away than Millis.
No, it's closer to 495.
That's affordable housing.
Not all of it.
Well, only 20%.
But the problem being is Medfield is closer
rental, so
to
all of it is.
128,
All of
Westwood.
it is considered
Medway's closer to
affordable.
495. Even though either way, it's another 10-minute drive from Millis, it creates a problem for businesses to want to come in.
Roach Brothers is really low. does really well. There's businesses that we could get here that would.
But you have to give them incentive, some form of incentive.
That's something to think about.
That's the
Yeah.
Economic Development
But we need
Committee.
to start getting,
Yes.
we need to start really pushing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree with
You know,
you.
I mean, you're welcome to Millis. You've only been around a little while. All of us have been 20, 30 years on planning boards and everything. That's all been tried. Believe me, people who are listening to this or that will watch it will just say,
We've tried it.
everything you've tried, we have overlays, we have underlays. You know how elated we were when Tractor Supply, we won them. We won them. There were 3 other towns that were into that, and we convinced them to come. So no, everybody, the whole team, when you, but I mean, you know, get another committee to do this. You're trying, it's not, the selectmen have, I'm sorry.
10 years later, you
Yeah.
know, things change, you know?
I think we need to remember, I would ask that we remember this conversation, which is good dialogue and necessary conversations to have. When we look at the different issues, you know, the other more immediate things that are coming up. People talk about an override, okay, well, that will bring your tax rate to above $20. You especially, and in the big picture, look at the school renovation, the high school, middle school. If that project comes up, it by itself will likely bring the tax rate over $20. So now you're talking 2 things. Then you add potentially an override for Voc Tech, which is, you know, we're talking about a vote now. It's probably not gonna happen for 4, 5, 6 years before it would hit the rolls, the tax rolls. I don't know. I'm not a, but you need to think long-term on
outta
these
here
things,
then.
even though they're near targets. There are big picture implications to all this stuff. But they're just incredibly important.
I just
especially
wish we
with the
could
school discussion.
regionalize, I really do, I just don't understand that there's such fights for regionalization, and it just.
And
with-
people, and Joyce, you know, you and I have talked about that. Regionalization doesn't mean everybody go to one school. You could
Right.
send a few to
Me-
Medfield, to an
Medway,
AP class there. You could send a few to, I mean, I went to King Philip. There were people from Plainville that had to drive an hour and 15 minutes on a bus to get to Norfolk for junior high.
It can be done,
It,
and it should be done. Our class sizes are getting smaller and smaller, and here we're wanting to build another school. I
and
don't
we
know.
have to build another school.
Yeah.
We have to do something for it.
Okay.
Thank you. Well done.
Finance Committee meeting minutes approval.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon?
I move that we accept the Finance Committee meeting minutes of March 8th as written.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that the committee vote to approve the minutes from March 8th as written. Discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All unanimously approved. I did want to say one more thing, and it was kind of on the lines of your comments, Kathy, about working with the boards, the committee, select board and the committee. So I believe the select board is going to have a budget workshop or working group next week. I think that's going to be on Wednesday. I have asked to be invited to go to that, to participate in that with Jody. I think that's going to happen. The idea behind that is that we work on these things, whether they allow us to participate or whether we're just there for awareness and to facilitate our understanding of what's being proposed. Either one of those things is good in my mind, but, you know, it's their meeting. I think they'll honor their request and invite us to attend. I would like to work with them along the way. I don't think having right now a 9-person body and convening a meeting is the way to go. So I've limited my request to just Jody and I. But there would be a follow-on tri-board between now and, you know, sometime in April, so that, again, there can be more discussion about what is the proposed budget going to look like, and that we would all have inputs. I thank everybody for letting them get through what I'm sure was a difficult presentation last night by Mr. Mullaney. I think he's doing a great job from what I see myself with my own 2 eyes and what Steve has relayed. If he's meeting with the faculty, it's exactly what he should be doing, and I can't imagine that that's easy to do. I know it's not easy to do it. So, anyway, I ask for your support, and if there are things that you want conveyed or asked along the way, you will get an opportunity to convey and ask them yourselves, but if there's things that you think need to come sooner than later, then please send them my way, and I'll make sure that I'm communicating the best I can with them and giving you the feedback that you need. So, any questions or comments on that? Okay, I'll take a motion.
Move we adjourn?
Second?
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.